Chapter 574. Now, Chu Tiancheng still had 2,000 points of luck left. Ling Xiao could easily kill him, but it was a waste to use the luck-plundering talisman on this half-crippled person. For a peerless saber cultivator, the best way to crush his Dao heart was to crush him directly. So what if you have luck? No matter how many times you reconstruct your Dao heart, I can still crush it with a flick of my finger. Boom! 100-meter-long saber light fell from the sky, full of Dao intent. However, this move was truly weak and powerless. The evil-warding saber manual was a secular cultivation technique, and its mysteries were only for mortals. Even if Chu Tiancheng was talented, he still hadn't reached the level of invincibility where he could kill immortals with a swing of his saber. On the path of immortality, talent was one thing, but cultivation techniques and spiritual treasures were also part of combat power. At the same level, how could a divine artifact shake a Dao artifact? Similarly, how could a saber cultivator who practiced secular martial arts cut a primordial sky demon that was already above his head? Crack! When the saber gleam entered his hand, the corners of Ling Xiao's mouth curled up into a smile. Then, under Chu Tiancheng's dumbfounded gaze, the saber light that was supposed to kill the enemy shattered into pieces. How is this possible? Seeing this, Chu Tiancheng's ferocious expression gradually froze. How is this possible? Why can't my saber cut him? Moreover, he couldn't even shake the power of his 2 fingers. Did Elder Dao lie to me? Beat. The child of destiny was shocked and made a wild guess. Congratulations to the host for plundering 500 luck points and 5,000 villain points. No, impossible. Without Elder Dao, I would have died in the Chu Palace. If there was no problem with the saber technique, then the problem must be with Ling Xiao. Suddenly, Chu Tiancheng felt a chill in his heart. Could it be that this young man's strength had already reached a level where he could crush him? Although the seal in the immortal world could suppress one's cultivation to the divine champion level. It was said that some primordial evildoers specialized in body cultivation and had physical strength comparable to immortal gods. Could it be, Brother Chu? Didn't you say that a single strike of your blade would be enough to kill me? Ling Xiao's laughter was more like a form of mockery. It caused Chu Tiancheng's trembling Dao heart to crack even more. I don't believe it. The 4th style of the Bixia saber manual, innocent. Chu Tiancheng's face was as calm as still water. Saber will filled the air around him, revealing an endless sharpness. Then, his entire body transformed into a graceful swan, holding the blood saber in his hand and furiously slashing at Ling Xiao. The void collapsed and fell into darkness. Tribulation lightning could be faintly seen wriggling through the sky. Boundless avatars began to rise and fall with vast divine might. In Chu Tiancheng's hand, the runes of the Dao laws evolved into a mysterious yellow. Amidst the blur, there seemed to be a celestial figure descending, exuding an ancient majesty. The mountains, rivers, the sun, the moon, the stars, and the Milky Way were not as resplendent as this saber strike. It was clear that Chu Tiancheng was going all out. A strand of blood light transformed into a sea, and within it was a dragon that left the abyss. It was like a steed flitting through a crack, destroying everything. An earth-shattering spiritual aura rose with a loud bang and turned into rolling waves, overturning the entire hall in an instant. As smoke and dust rose, Chu Tiancheng's figure finally appeared above Ling Xiao's head. In the next instant, the blood light converged into a line, and countless Dao sounds rang out. Meanwhile, the celestial figure behind Chu Tiancheng suddenly opened its eyes. Slash! As soon as the word fell, a terrifying divine might surged out, containing an unstoppable momentum. The domineering saber divine physique was now accompanied by Dao laws. This crown prince of the great Chu dynasty had finally bloomed today. However, looking at the blood light descending from the sky, Ling Xiao's face was still expressionless. He clenched his fist and punched out. Endless blood chi soared into the sky without a trace of spiritual aura mixed in. Since he wanted to break Dao Heart, of course, he would use the most direct and simple method. I've said before, your saber can't cut me. You can't even break my physical body. So, what do you have to compete with me? Ling Xiao. You're too arrogant. Chu Tianqing's eyes were filled with hatred. At this moment, he could feel that Ling Xiao was deliberately humiliating him and messing with his Dao Heart. This was a trick. However, it seemed to have succeeded. He was furious. Boom. The moment the fist and the saber collided, the entire immortal world trembled. Immediately after, boundless divine light rippled. Everywhere it passed, everything was shattered into nothingness. Ling Xiao stood where he was and did not move at all. Meanwhile, Chu Tianqing, together with the celestial figure behind him, flew hundreds of miles away. The blood blade in his hand shattered inch by inch. What shattered along with it was the majestic celestial shadow above his head. Poof! He was defeated in the end. It was a crushing defeat. The Dao Heart of the Chosen One has been shattered. Congratulations to the host for plundering 1,000 luck points and 10,000 villain points. Chu Tianqing landed on the ground. All the bones in his body had been broken by Ling Xiao's punch. Especially the two hands holding the saber, they were badly mangled and smashed into meat paste. At this moment, he was lying on the ground, wriggling all over. He did not feel any pain, only a bone-chilling coldness. Why? What happened to killing gods with a swing of the saber? What happened to conquering strength with gentleness and killing with one slash? Was it because Ling Xiao had not used the saber technique from beginning to end? Yes. The saber elder taught me the saber technique to restrain Ling Xiao's saber intent. But just now, he did not use the saber at all. Damn. I was too careless. Thump, thump, thump. It was not until the sound of footsteps in front of him that Chu Tianqing put aside his distracting thoughts and looked up at the immortal-like figure in white. Ling Xiao, I admit that you are very strong, but you better kill me now. Otherwise, sooner or later, I will cut you down with my saber. Oh! Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, a hint of a smile on his lip. Indeed, this saber cultivator would rather die than submit. You are already at death's door, yet you are still pretending to be weak. Do you think I will be like the other villains who will be angered by you, admire your backbone, and give you a chance to cultivate to become a god and come back to kill me? I won't kill you now. Chu Tianqing narrowed his eyes and a trace of fighting spirit appeared in his heart. He is indeed looking down on me. But Ling Xiao, you are very strong and can crush your generation. But I, Chu Tianqing, am not convinced. One day, I will surpass the heavens and fight with you. From the previous tribulation, Chu Tianqing could see that although Ling Xiao was arrogant and heartless, he had a bottom line. Perhaps he killed the geniuses of the western border just to train his Dao Heart? In this way, meeting a stronger opponent should be what this young supreme being yearned for. Ling Xiao, although our paths are different, I am willing to call you my lifelong bond. Generally, in the early stages of the storyline, the child of destiny would inevitably encounter an unbelievably powerful villain of the same generation. Then, this villain would disappear for about 10 years and become the destined child's obsession. At first, the villain did not take the destined child seriously and did not even care about the square he had set up. Until one day, the destined child silently rose and walked in front of him. XX, do you still remember me? I said I would cut you down with my saber. When the plot reached its climax, it was another familiar wave of posturing and face-slapping. But, Ching-er, I am afraid you are thinking too much. I said I won't kill you now, but I did not say, I won't kill you later. Chapter 575. Ling Xiao. There will be a day. Chu Tianqing took a deep breath. His eyes were clear, as if he had just walked out of the dejection of his defeat. Since Ling Xiao said that he would not kill him, he would not go back on his word. With Elder Dao's guidance, Chu Tianqing believed that he would still stand at the top of the world and have an unprecedented battle with Ling Xiao. Wait, Qing, or do you know why you lost today? Ling Xiao hurriedly waved his hand to interrupt Chu Tianqing. Qing. Suddenly, Chu Tianqing's expression turned cold, and an inexplicable blush appeared on his face. Only Elder Dao would call him Qing, but as expected? Although I lost, I obviously have the qualifications to be Lord Ling Xiao's enemy. Such an intimate form of address might be the beginning of his respect for me. Saber users are indomitable and cut off karma. Ling Xiao, in the next 10 years, there will be legends of you and me in Shijiang. It's because I have concerns in my heart. I miss women, so I lost. Chu Tianqing took a deep breath. Although his tone was a little lonely, it was also full of sincerity. It was like a casual conversation between two old friends, without any hostility. If there is no woman in your heart, you will naturally draw your saber? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and suddenly shook his head. Then do you know what the second half of this sentence is? The second half? Chu Tianqing raised his head and looked at Ling Xiao blankly. At this time, all the bones in his body were broken, and he could not stand up at all. Otherwise, why do you think I, the dignified Tianming, would lie on the ground and chat with someone like a dead dog? If you have a sister in your arms, the damage will be doubled. Ling Xiao smiled faintly, but Chu Tianqing's expression instantly became sluggish. What the f***ck? Does this mean that if you have a sister in your heart, your saber intent will be more domineering? Elder Dao, do you know anything about sabers? Why is it that what you said is completely different from what Lord Ling Xiao said? Or perhaps you've only comprehended a superficial level of saber intent, while Lord Ling Xiao has seen through the true meaning of saber cultivation. Yes, that must be it. Otherwise, why would I lose to him again and again? So it was because I was cultivating in the wrong direction. Does this mean that I chopped this root for nothing? Instantly, Chu Tianqing only felt anger in his heart, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Beep, the chosen one is filled with resentment. Congratulations to host for plundering 300 luck points and 3,000 villain points. Young master, I understand now. So this is the reason why I lost. Chu Tianqing let out a long sigh, his eyes filled with sorrow. At this moment, he couldn't figure out whether he revered Ling Xiao or hated him. That's right, he had killed Yuan Yao, the love of his life. But now, after listening to his words, Chu Tianqing's understanding of the path of the saber seemed to have deepened. This was the so-called love-hate relationship. A qualified villain was definitely not the kind who only knew how to show off and appear at the peak. It was the kind of who accompanied the protagonist as he grew, who was both friend and foe, until the end an unavoidable battle. The dispute was over and the grudges were settled. I'll hold a cup of turbid wine to commemorate your death and remember your past. There was an inner taste. No, Chinger, you're wrong again. The real reason you lost was because the cultivation method you practiced was taught to you by me. Ling Xiao suddenly grinned, took out an ancient blue book from his chest, and threw it in front of Chu Tianqing. The determination on Chu Tianqing's face didn't disappear, and then he became sluggish. At this moment, he saw it. The ancient book that Ling Xiao casually threw on the ground had 4 big words written on it. Bixia Sword Manual. Moreover, there was a small line of words below the manual. Heart Flower Publishing House. How could it be? Impossible. How could he have such a cultivation method? Chu Tianqing trembled as he stuck out his tongue and opened the first page of the manual. In the next moment, his face was completely pale. To practice this cultivation method, one must castrate himself first. Poochie! Without hesitation, Chu Tianqing spat out a mouthful of blood several meters away. He raised his head and looked at Ling Xiao with confusion and pain. So, your old Dao? But, why do you want to destroy me even though you've clearly helped me? Beep, child of destiny's heart will of life and death. Congratulations to the host for plundering 200 luck points and 2,000 villain points. Beep, child of destiny's fate has been lost. Killing him now will give you an additional reward. A dead man doesn't need to know too much. Ling Xiao smiled indifferently, raised his foot, and stomped on Chu Tianqing's raised head. Poochie. Blood and brain matter splattered on the ground. Chu Tianqing still didn't understand why the old Dao he respected was Ling Xiao. Beep, congratulations to the host for successfully killing the child of destiny. Reward, Dao of Saber, Enlightenment. Fate casting value, 2%. Ancient Body Refining Technique. Holy Thunder Divine Body. Holy Thunder Divine Body? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows and disappeared from the main hall in a flash. His original form was the immemorial Sky Demon. He had gone through 9 transformations and was immortal. Therefore, this body refining technique wasn't very useful to him. However, it didn't mean that others were useless. Buzz. Ling Xiao appeared out of thin air in the north of the realm. Below him, 20,000 blood guards opened their eyes at the same time and bowed to the void. Greetings, Lord. I have a technique here that all of you can cultivate. With that, Ling Xiao spread out his consciousness and imprinted the Holy Thunder Divine Body that he had just obtained in everyone's minds. Then, with a wave of his hand, a 1,000-foot-long thunder sun instantly appeared and hung above everyone's heads. The thunder intent within was vast and unparalleled, illuminating an area of hundreds of miles. Observe the cultivation of this day. The Thunder Dao Law was the most original power of thunder in the world. Observing this day and comprehending the power of thunder would be very beneficial to the cultivation of this ancient body. Thank you, Lord. With the strength of these 20,000 blood guards, although they weren't the best in the Xingzhou, they didn't have outstanding talent. However, 20,000 blood guards who had cultivated the Thunder Divine Body, when gathered together, would make one's scalp tingle. At this moment, Ling Xiao was already looking forward to the day when the blood guards were born. What kind of waves would the Xingzhou stir up? Young Master. When Ling Xiao appeared outside the heavenly hall, a beautiful figure in white immediately came up to him. Although Han Qingqiu's face was still cold, there was a hint of a smile in her eyes. Yes. How is Ning Er? Ling Xiao gazed into the distance and looked in front of the Sky Hall. However, he saw that Ning Er's figure had already disappeared. Ning Er seems to be comprehending the Dao Law. Feng Ling said it would take a long time and took her away. Han Qingqiu's eyes were gentle as she explained softly. Ling Xiao wasn't surprised by this. From the moment Ning Er appeared, he knew that this little girl's model would be extremely powerful. After all, which one of Qing Mei's characters wasn't the child of destiny's existence? On the other hand, Feng Ling seemed to be very protective of this little girl. Young Master, is everything settled? With Han Qingqiu's personality, it was usually difficult for her to speak 3 sentences in a row. But today, she seemed a little different. Chapter 576. Yes, Mo Wuye is dead. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. Han Qingqiu's eyes flashed with a hint of hesitation. Young Master, my martial aunt, where did Yu Xiao go? She's also dead. After you left, Yu Xiao suddenly attacked me. It was inexplicable. However, I found something on her body. Ling Xiao suddenly thought of something and took out a green ancient token from his Qian Kuan ring. I checked her soul consciousness. This thing seems to be the key to opening the immortal realm. Qingqiu, do you know it? Ling Xiao had already guessed Han Qingqiu's identity. This immortal token must be related to the location of the demon bone. To be able to resist the suppression of this realm, this token must have a great background. And he was a villain. If he wanted to open the opportunity and find the fortune, it would most likely be a little difficult. But Han Qingqiu was different. although this young girl had already submitted to him and was willing to travel with the demon bone. However, she was truly a person of destiny. Giving her the immortal token was the right way to open the immortal realm. Of course, no matter what kind of danger was hidden in the immortal realm that suppressed the demon bone, Ling Xiao would not let Han Qingqiu enter rashly. After all, this young girl's role was not as simple as a leak. He had to chew on it slowly. Cold Moon Immortal Token? Sure enough, Han Qingqiu's expression changed when she saw the token. Perhaps she could not understand why this immortal treasure was in Yu Zhao's hands. However, she knew the use of this token. Young master was right. This immortal token was indeed the key to opening the immortal realm. But why was it in Martial Ant's hands? There was a chance. Looking at the confusion on Han Qingqiu's face, Ling Zhao's lips curled up into a smile. Qingqiu, you know this token? Yes, young master. This token is called the Cold Moon Immortal Token. It's the symbol of the Cold Moon Palace Master's identity. It's just that this token has been missing for 100 years. Even Ren Yuing has been looking for it. Han Qingqiu said truthfully. She did not understand Yu Zhao's character. As for the relationship between Yu Zhao and the Cold Moon Palace Master, very few people knew about it. Otherwise, how do you think she was able to survive in the Cold Moon Immortal Palace until now? Ever since Han Qingqiu entered the Immortal Sect, Yu Zhao had always acted as if she had no desires and stood aloof from worldly affairs. Even though they were both on the same immortal mountain, the chances for the two of them to meet were pitifully few. As for why Yu Zhao would attack Ling Xiao, Han Qingqiu had already guessed it. That was the fortune to become an immortal. On the surface, Ling Xiao was a disciple of the divine envoy of the saint. The reason Yu Zhao hid this token was most likely to find an opportunity to enter the immortal world and find that fortune. However, once this matter was known by the saint, she would be killed by the saint regardless of whether she found the secret to becoming an immortal or not. Perhaps she had never intended to let anyone from the immortals off from the very beginning. Of course, she probably wouldn't be able to find that fortune either. With Ling Zhao's temperament and methods, it was impossible for him to leave any threat behind. Therefore, Han Qingqiu had already expected Yu Zhao's death. Oh? Then Qingqiu, what's the use of this token? Ling Zhao's eyes flickered with demonic light while Han Qingqiu remained silent. After a long while, she raised her head and looked at Ling Xiao. Her eyes were filled with sadness. So, young master, you're also here for the secret to becoming an immortal, right? The secret to becoming an immortal? In this world, how could there be a fortune to become an immortal in one step? Everyone who stands on the heavenly pole has walked step by step. Those who reach the heavenly pole in one step are dead. Ling Xiao stood with his hands behind his back, his eyes filled with determination. His white robe emitted starlight and his body revealed an inexplicable sense of vicissitude. Hearing this, Han Qingqiu's face flashed with surprise. For a moment, she actually saw a trace of loneliness in this evil and cruel demon who toyed with the world. That's right. He's lonely, isn't he? The path he chose was destined to be the enemy of the entire world. Even though he was toying with the world in the palm of his hand, he still schemed and planned every step carefully. The glory on the surface was not eternal peace. On the contrary, he lived a life that was more tiring than anyone else. Suddenly, Han Qingqiu's heart seemed to have a new emotion. She quietly looked at the young man in front of her. Looking at the obsession in his black eyes, her lips slowly curled into a smile. I will accompany you. Her voice was soft but firm. Ling Xiao pretended to be puzzled and turned his head to look at the woman with bright eyes and a smile on her beautiful face. Suddenly, he shook his head and laughed bitterly. You better not fall in love with me. Remember, I'm a devil, and devils don't have true feelings. I don't care. Han Qingqiu took a deep breath. Her entire body began to emit moonlight. From the moment Ling Xiao appeared in front of her and blocked Mo Wuya, Han Qingqiu felt that there was something more in her heart. She felt that she was becoming more and more like a human. She would worry about gains and losses. She would have distracting thoughts. This was something that had never happened in the past hundreds of years. The path I want to walk is extremely dangerous. Not everyone has the courage to walk on it. Don't worry. I will do what I promised you. I know why you want to follow me. I will destroy the holy sect sooner or later. We will talk about the rest later. Ling Xiao looked up at the sky. His face was 45 degrees from the side. He looked resolute and handsome. Stinky sister, so this is what you like. The cold and aloof woman who harbored great hatred in her heart knew little about love. Therefore, when there is suddenly more care in their life than hatred, it is easier for them to fall for it. It starts with being touched and ends with acting cool. I can play any role you like. Young master, I can help you open the last secret realm. In the end, Han Qingqiu did not dwell on this matter too much. She transformed into a human for revenge. But all of a sudden, everything seemed to have changed. She did not have much obsession with the good and evil. In this world, those who love me are righteous. Those who hate me deserve to die. Beat. The destined woman is transforming into the sky. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 500 luck points and 5,000 villain points. But, young master, there is a ferocious thing suppressed in that secret realm. Also, according to what I know, there is an ancient powerhouse guarding it. Han Qingqiu looked at Ling Xiao. There was no longer any hesitation on her face. He did not covet the good fortune to become an immortal. So, he will not be disappointed, right? But it is dangerous. Even the palace lord is afraid of it. Once the ruins appear, how will young master deal with it? No worries. You just need to help me find the ruins. Leave the rest to me. Young master, if there is no good fortune to become an immortal in the ruins, isn't it a bit unworthy to take such a risk? In the end, Han Qingqiu asked the biggest concern in her heart. But what surprised her was that Ling Xiao only smiled and shook his head. I did not come here for the good fortune to become an immortal. The world is stupid. They always dream of reaching the heavens in a single step. But to me, the suppressed demonic thing is the greatest fortune. Ling Xiao's words were half true and half false. The good fortune to become an immortal was far away on the horizon but close at hand. To him, the demonic bone was the goal of this trip. Moreover, if becoming an immortal was so easy, then the previous Cold Moon Palace master would not have been harmed by others and ended up with her body and Tao vanishing. Chapter 577. You want to get that demonic item? Han Qingqiu's face lit up as she nodded silently. As for Ling Xiao's identity, although part of her memory had been erased, she could roughly guess it. Whether it was Xia Feng or Jiang Yu, why would a demon suddenly appear in Shijiang? Outsiders may not know, but Han Qingqiu knew that this was all part of this young man's plan. But even so, a plan must be convincing. The demonic could not be fake. Those demons in the present world also obeyed Ling Xiao. Therefore, perhaps, this gentle-looking young master with a celestial aura was the true devil in the eyes of the world. Especially his methods and temperament, they had nothing to do with the righteous path. It was precisely because of this that the occasional warmth was so precious. He schemed against the holy sect, pretended to be a disciple of the divine messenger, killed the emperor of the dynasty. The rules of this world seemed to have no restrictions on him. He was free and unrestrained. But the more he was like this, the more fascinating he was. That's right. My cultivation technique is related to this. So, I must get this demonic item. Ling Xiao nodded, his expression was still calm. How could he not guess the concerns in Han Qingqiu's heart? So, if he wanted her to work in peace, he had to make her believe that Ling Xiao was after something. But it was not the opportunity to become an immortal. I know. Don't worry, I will help you find the entrance to the ruins. Han Qingqiu played with the immortal token in her hand and finally returned it to Ling Xiao. This immortal token is the key to opening the ruins. You should keep it with you. As for the ruins, if I remember correctly, it should be in the deepest part of the immortal world. But it is usually covered by demonic light. You need to use the inheritance technique of the Cold Moon Immortal Palace to open it. The inheritance technique of the Cold Moon Immortal Palace? Ling Xiao sneered as a look of understanding flashed across his eyes. Now it seems that the existence of the immortal world and the Cold Moon Immortal Palace was deliberately arranged by someone. And this person with ulterior motives should be the immortal clan expert that Xiong Huan had mentioned. But in this case, what kind of role did the holy sect play? This layer of fog had never been broken. However, Ling Xiao had a vague feeling that perhaps the source of the conflict was related to Yi Qing. Don't worry, there's still some time before the end of the Immortals. You can stay here and cultivate in peace for the next few days. When the time is right, I'll come and get you. Ling Xiao casually tossed a Qianquan bag to Han Qingqiu. There's a Tier 7 spirit pill inside. It should be able to help you break through. Thank you, young master. Han Qingqiu pursed her red lips as she watched the figure leave. However, when Ling Xiao's aura completely disappeared, she opened her Qianquan bag and took out a white jade spiritual pill. An extremely complicated expression flashed across her beautiful eyes. It was as if he was regretting, as if he was reminiscing. In the depths of the realm, where heaven and earth intersected and rivers and seas connected, Ling Xiao sat cross-legged on the spot, while Xiong Huan, Xing Shen, and the others stood quietly in front of him. Xiong Huan, take them and search for the fortune of the ancient palace in the immortal world. Kill all the remaining prodigies of the western frontier while you're at it. Yes, master. Hearing this, there was no change in their expressions. They turned around and disappeared. Less than half of the prodigies of the western frontier were still alive. However, who knew if Xia Feng or Mo Wuye had made friends with any of them? After all, the immortal world was filled with danger. Even if they died, no one would suspect them. Only by killing them all would there not be any accident. As for the last relic, it couldn't run away. When it would open would depend on my mood. However, to be honest, facing an ancient powerhouse, even Ling Xiao had to be cautious. Therefore, it was better to increase his strength as much as possible before slowly plotting. Buzz. Between heaven and earth, there was a sudden flash of spiritual light. As for the white-robed figure, he slowly closed his eyes. Like a boulder, there was no change in his expression. Around him, there was a faint moonlight flowing. It was mysterious and unfathomable. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, 1 month had passed. During this 1 month, the originally noisy immortal world suddenly quieted down. None of the prodigies of the western frontier who entered the immortal world survived. Within the realm, Ling Xiao suddenly opened his eyes. Around him, there was a majestic spiritual pressure. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared without a trace. A 9th-grade divine overlord, only 1 step away from the first divine king realm. A 17-year-old divine king? Once this news gets out, the entire Xingzhou will fall into chaos. Throughout history, there will always be a peerless genius appearing in every generation. However, compared to Ling Xiao, these people were still far from him. It's time to meet that immortal powerhouse. Ling Xiao's eyes flashed with demonic intent. With a thought, he appeared before the heavenly palace. At this moment, Han Qingqiu's figure was sitting cross-legged on the plaza. Spiritual light was shining around her and her aura was that of a 7th-grade divine general. Young master? As if sensing Ling Xiao's aura, Han Qingqiu opened her eyes and a smile appeared on her face. Let's go. Ling Xiao grabbed Han Qingqiu's hand and disappeared on the spot. Feeling the warmth from his hand, Han Qingqiu's face turned red. In the end, she did not struggle. Instead, she felt a sense of satisfaction. In the past, the two of them had deep interactions, but those interactions were forced and emotionless. However, in this short month, Han Qingqiu had never felt so frustrated. It was not because of hatred, but because she had not seen her young master for a month. Deep within the immortal world, Ling Xiao and Han Qingqiu stood side by side, looking at a mountain covered in demonic qi. If not for Han Qingqiu's guidance, Ling Xiao would have thought that this was the end of the immortal world and nothing was out of the ordinary. Young master, the palace that suppresses the demonic creatures is on the peak of the mountain. Han Qingqiu's face inexplicably carried a bit of seriousness and a trace of faint nostalgia. Ling Xiao's eyes were calm as he looked at the end of the demonic fog. People of the immortal race, I wonder what kind of surprise he will bring to me this time. Young master, with my current strength, it is difficult to break this seal. I can only help you open a gap. You must be careful. Han Qingqiu sighed. Based on her understanding of this young master, once he has decided on something, no one can stop him. So, there is no point in saying more. It is better to work hard to become stronger and be a useful person. Okay. Ling Xiao nodded. Suddenly, a moonlight floated in the sky around Han Qingqiu. The bright silver light shone through the 9 heavens, dispersing all the fog. On the peak of the mountain that was covered in demonic qi, a ray of light suddenly lit up. Next, a spiritual array that covered the sky gradually revealed its true form. There seemed to be mountains and rivers rippling and surging. Like an immortal descending, it completely suppressed the demonic qi in the mountain. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed. His body flew up into the sky and headed towards a dark and ancient stone palace on the peak of the mountain. In his hand, the cold moon immortal token shone brightly and let out a loud buzzing sound. Chapter 578. Boom! When Ling Xiao's figure disappeared, Han Qingqiu's delicate body trembled, and she almost fell to the ground. At this moment, her face was already ghastly pale. On her fragrant forehead, large beads of sweat flowed down along her fine black hair. However, there was no trace of exhaustion in her eyes. Instead, there was a trace of seriousness and worry in her eyes. That ancient palace contained extremely terrifying demonic intent. Even if an emperor god expert entered, his Tao heart would be easily disturbed. Moreover, there was an ancient expert guarding the depths of the palace. Young master, if you barge in recklessly, you will most likely die. Young master, please take care. Qingqiu will pray for you in front of the mountain and pray for your safety. If you don't come out in 2 months, I will also build a grave for you and set up a tombstone to let you rest in peace. However, I can't die, because I still have a blood feud to avenge. Buzz. On the peak of the mountain, Ling Xiao's figure descended from the sky. With the cold moon celestial token as a guide, the ancient array did not resist him at all. At this moment, at the end of his sight, there was an extremely majestic stone palace quietly standing there. Even though there was a distance between them, Ling Xiao could still feel the terrifying divine power and a trace of familiar demonic intent flowing around it. Tens of thousands of Tao runes bloomed with divine light. They were densely packed like vines, wrapping the ancient palace layer by layer. Endless demonic aura spread out from the gaps of the Tao runes, forming a seal that almost overturned the sky. The blue sky was dark, and there were faint demonic shadows and demonic chants. However, no matter how the demonic shadows roared, they were all suppressed by a layer of moonlight. The moonlight turned into an array, connecting the 8 directions and communicating with the 4 universes. It formed the 2 forces of heaven and earth, controlling the 2 forces of heaven and earth, and sealed the sea of demonic aura. As expected, I can't suppress it any longer. Ling Xiao was not in a hurry to enter the palace. Instead, he raised his head and looked at the ancient moonlight array on the peak of the mountain. On it, there were divine runes crisscrossing, revealing endless mysteries. Even with Ling Xiao's temperament, he still felt a chill in his heart when he saw the array. However, even though the ancient array was mysterious and unpredictable, the sea of demonic aura had the power to cover the sky. It was obvious that the person who sealed this place would not allow the demonic aura to leak out. The current situation could only mean that he was gradually losing control of the array. Senior, are you at the end of your tether? Since that's the case, why don't you ask this junior to help you suppress that demonic bone? Buzz. The cold moon ancient token suddenly released a blinding light. Ling Xiao didn't hesitate any longer and walked towards the ancient palace. No matter what kind of danger was hidden in the palace, it was not much of a threat to Ling Xiao. As long as he wanted to escape, he could hide in a realm at any time. At most, he would just endure and see who would die first. Moreover, there was still the purple chi stainless divine body in the realm. As long as he was alive, even if Ling Xiao's main body died, he wouldn't be completely dead. Above the ancient palace, Dao runes flickered. Every single one of them seemed to contain a powerful amount of energy that made one feel terrified. Ling Xiao stood in front of the ancient palace and looked at the terrifying demonic chi gushing out from the gap of the palace door. His eyes gradually surged with joy. There was no mistake. The demonic chi in this demonic chi was exactly the same as his sky demon body. If Ling Xiao's guess was right, what was sealed in this palace was probably what his sky demon fourth refinement stage needed: the sky demon true bone. Ling Xiao wasn't very sure how the primordial sky demon died in the end. However, this great demon was born at the beginning of the primordial era and was formed by the first darkness in the world. Logically speaking, his body and divine soul should be immortal and indestructible. Even if he was severely injured or shattered, he definitely wouldn't die. Otherwise, why did you think he stood proudly at the top of the world and made the immortals and gods bow their heads and worship him? But in the end, he still died. There must be some secrets that Ling Xiao didn't know about. Or rather, there was something fishy about this great demon's death. Of course, for the current Ling Xiao, it was still far from the time to come into contact with such a secret. He just didn't know if the immortal's divine soul would taste different. Buzz! Ling Xiao reached out and touched the stone door of the ancient palace lightly. In his hand, the cold moon ancient token shone brightly. The originally dim ancient door also had starlight flowing around it, forming a formation and emitting a dazzling light. Boom! The palace door slowly opened, and a sea of demonic chi gushed out like a tide. If it was an ordinary expert, just the corrosion of this demonic chi would be enough to make him lose his mind. However, for Ling Xiao, this demonic chi was not dangerous at all. Instead, it was a great supplement. Of course, now that he was in the formation, he naturally didn't dare to openly devour the demonic chi. However, after he got rid of that immortal, this place would be a good place to cultivate. Finally, when the door of the ancient palace was completely opened, Ling Xiao lifted his feet and walked in. At this moment, an ancient bronze cauldron stood quietly in the middle of the palace. Dao patterns flowed on it, and immortal light rippled. It was actually another immortal treasure that surpassed a Dao artifact. This cauldron should be the numinous treasure that the previous Cold Moon Palace masters used to refine pills. Ling Xiao sneered. He wasn't in a hurry to keep this numinous treasure. Instead, he continued to walk into the depths of the ancient palace. At this moment, he didn't feel any divine soul fluctuation in the palace. However, the more it was like this, the more nervous Ling Xiao became. It was obvious that to be able to hide the divine soul fluctuation so perfectly, that immortal was either dead or his divine soul's level was much higher than Ling Xiao's. Dead? That's not very possible. Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. His eyes were cold. When he appeared in the depths of the ancient palace, his expression turned serious. 100 zhang tall ancient door stood at the end of Ling Xiao's line of sight. The carvings on it were mottled with rust, revealing an ancient aura. In the middle of the ancient door, a hole in the token suddenly appeared. This cold moon immortal token is indeed the key to opening this door. Ling Xiao lowered his head and looked at the immortal token in his hand. Without any hesitation, he raised his hand and inserted it into the hole. Buzz! An ear-piercing sound echoed throughout the entire palace. The entire barren mountain started to shake for no reason. Rays of dazzling light began to shine from the peak of the mountain. It turned into the silhouette of an immortal god, standing in the void. At the foot of the mountain, Han Qingqiu's beautiful eyes narrowed. She raised her head and looked at the silhouette that suddenly appeared. Her jade-like hands unconsciously clenched. It was obvious that the young master had most likely entered the place where the demonic creature was sealed. However, at the same time, the danger that the young master would face had just begun. In the depths of the ancient palace, Ling Xiao's face was also somewhat shocked. Before him, the ancient door disappeared into thin air and turned into a space enchantment. Inside, immortal light rippled and Tao energy flowed. It was indescribably majestic. It was as if it connected the two worlds and led to another unknown space. However, Ling Xiao didn't hesitate at all. He didn't prepare too many tricks. His white robe shone with starlight. His figure finally strode in. Right now, his identity was the disciple of the cold moon immortal token. If he was too cautious, it would be easy to arouse suspicion. Thus, he might as well be frank. Who knows, there might be an unexpected surprise. Chapter 579. Boom. Boom. In the void barrier, Ling Xiao walked slowly. In his ears, Tao sounds echoed. In front of him, divine shadows overlapped like an illusion of time, constantly changing shape. Time passed slowly. After an unknown period of time, when the illusions in front of him dissipated and the divine light dimmed, Ling Xiao finally stopped. At this moment, what appeared in front of him was no longer the immortal palace ruins, but an otherworldly forest with beautiful mountains and clear waters. There were tens of thousands of peach trees in the forest, and mist was dense. Flowers bloomed on every peach tree. Spiritual light flowed on them, and Tao intent spread out. The Tao light soared into the sky and gathered into a river above the peach forest, flickering like starlight. It was extremely spectacular. You're finally here. Just as Ling Xiao looked at the immortal forest in front of him calmly, a gentle sigh suddenly sounded in his heart. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed, and a trace of coldness appeared in his heart for no reason. This voice was calm and ancient, without the slightest emotion. There was a hint of the great Tao holy will in it, causing one's mind to be clear, and the spiritual energy around one's body seemed to show signs of collapsing. In the peach forest, a spiritual wind suddenly blew, blowing thousands of peach blossoms down and whistling towards Ling Xiao. Seeing this scene, Ling Xiao's body tensed up, but he did not dare to move at all. However, there seemed to be a wisp of moonlight flickering around his body. Buzz! Peach blossom petals fell like rain. However, what surprised Ling Xiao was that the rain of petals did not carry any power when it fell from the sky. Before he could think further, the thousands of peach blossoms suddenly turned into pink spiritual light and disappeared without a trace after a short bloom. Wisps of spiritual light descended, evolving into boundless phenomena. At the same time, a figure suddenly appeared in the depths of the peach blossom forest, and it was lying on the branch of an ancient tree while looking at him with a teasing gaze. Around its body, there was a faint immortal radiance that evolved into stars and moons, filled with an eternal and indestructible intent. That's right, it's the cold moon cultivation technique. Are you a disciple of the immortal palace? Hearing this, Ling Xiao's eyes trembled slightly. There seemed to be fear on his face, but he snorted coldly in his heart. Fortunately, when he killed Yu Xiao back then, he had conveniently cultivated this cold moon immortal palace's legacy cultivation method. The peach blossom rain just now was most likely this person's method of probing him. However, with the ancient Panga rock, Even a Saint Realm expert would absolutely be unable to easily investigate the secrets in Ling Zhao's possession. Ling Zhao's current fear was, of course, an act. After all, this person was the founder of the Cold Moon's Celestial Palace. However, what surprised Ling Zhao was that this person from the celestial race was actually a woman. Moreover, from the looks of it, she was a picturesque, peerless woman. She was young and beautiful like a 16-year-old girl. Her black hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall. She seemed to have merged with the peach forest, giving her a unique charm. That's right. Disciple Ling Zhao. Ling Zhao smiled cautiously and bowed to the immortal woman from afar. At this moment, he could sense that this immortal's cultivation had clearly surpassed the realm of the God Emperor. However, just as Xiong Huan had said, due to the restrictions of the Xingzhou Heavenly Tao, her cultivation level was still stuck at the first level of the God Emperor realm. Even so, with the battle strength Ling Zhao possessed, it would still be somewhat difficult to kill her directly. However, at this moment, Ling Zhao could also tell that although this lady was powerful, she was only a soul. If he could lure her into his soul sea, it would not be impossible to kill her. Alright, you should prepare. My physical body is shattered and I can't get close to the seal. Take the immortal token and enter to stabilize the seal. Just as Ling Zhao was thinking to himself, he suddenly heard the indifferent words of the woman in the forest. A look of surprise flashed across his face. Was this what it meant by someone giving him a pillow when he was tired? This immortal was obviously unable to walk out of the ruins. Otherwise, she would not have been able to stay here for hundreds of years and rely on the immortal treasure array to deceive the western border prodigies and steal their spiritual power. As long as Ling Zhao obtained the demonic bone, this trip would be complete. Although he could not kill this immortal now, it did not mean that he could not kill her in the future. At least in Ling Zhao's opinion, Sect Master Taishan had the ability to kill this immortal. Originally, Ling Zhao had hoped that this immortal's cultivation level would drop and that Xiong Huan and the others would work together to kill her. However, the moment Ling Zhao saw her, he knew that Xiong Huan could not kill her. Moreover, this space was full of mysteries and was full of Tao. This immortal might have other tricks up her sleeve. If Ling Zhao could not kill her in one go, he might completely miss the opportunity to obtain the demonic bone. The methods of ancient experts were not something that the current Ling Zhao could imagine. However, he really did not expect this immortal to believe him so easily. Moreover, she even took the initiative to give him a chance to get close to the demonic bone. Could it be that because of the increase in destiny forging points, I, Ling Zhao, also have my own creation? However, Ling Zhao calmed down very quickly. The Han Yu Palace Master had been dead for hundreds of years. Now, the array formation in the immortal world had also been destroyed by Ling Zhao. However, why did this immortal not ask about it at all? Moreover, she clearly still had her strength. Why couldn't she suppress the demonic qi here? What are you waiting for? Use the immortal palace inheritance of our sect and activate the immortal token to suppress that demonic thing. Otherwise, I'm afraid that the demonic qi here will really break the seal of the array formation. Sigh. On the branch of the ancient tree, the female immortal suddenly sighed softly. Her eyes seemed a little sad. In less than 100 years, if this demonic bone cannot be completely suppressed, I'm afraid that even with my life, it will be difficult to seal it again. How is the refinement of that elixir? It's almost done, Ling Zhao said indifferently. A hint of doubt flashed in his eyes. It was obvious that this female immortal had reached the end of her rope. Could it be that he had been thinking too much from the beginning? Originally, Ling Zhao thought that this female immortal might have other thoughts about the demonic bone since she had left behind her inheritance, array formation, and various other methods to seal the demonic bone. However, after seeing it today, this female immortal also seemed to want to suppress the bone as soon as possible. It was just that. She was somewhat powerless. To put it simply, it was not that she wanted the bone, but that she was not strong enough and could not truly seal it. Yes, in 100 years this is the only hope. There must not be any accident. After saying that, the female immortal suddenly stood up and looked at the void. Then, Ling Xiao was somewhat shocked to see that in the peach forest, thousands of peach blossoms rose up and gathered into a river, floating toward the distant sky. Buzz! Heaven and earth trembled. Countless Tao patterns appeared in the sky. In the end, they formed the illusory image of an ancient palace. It quietly floated in the air, revealing a surging aura. In an instant, the entire secret realm was filled with the whistling of spiritual wind. Peach blossoms were everywhere. A heavenly path formed completely by peach blossoms descended from above and stood in front of Ling Xiao. Remember, you must use all your strength to stabilize the seal. Yes. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. He lifted his foot and walked toward the heavenly path. Now, it seemed that this trip to the immortal world had gone surprisingly smoothly. However, watching the young man's figure gradually disappear at the end of her sight, the female immortal's lips curled into a faint smile. Chapter 580. Boom! As Ling Xiao stepped onto the path of immortality, the peach blossom spirit shadows quietly shattered wherever he went, turning into starlight that scattered from the sky. Above the void, rivers began to form, and the sun and moon began to rise and fall. Godly figures that were hundreds of meters tall seemed to step through the void and arrive, standing around the ancient palace. Like the most loyal servants, they suppressed all evil in the world. Clearly, the Peach Blossom Immortal Road and the Void Anomaly were the doing of the female immortal. The heavenly demon bone that was sealed in this hall should be the heavenly demon bone. In the end, the path of immortality shattered, the spirit light extinguished, and countless Tao inscriptions turned into nothingness. The entire immortal realm fell into a dead silence. Only the female immortal stood with her hands behind her back. She looked at the ancient palace above her, her eyes filled with inexplicable vicissitudes. It's been 900 years. On the other side, Ling Zhao's figure appeared in the Golden Palace. Only now did he understand why the immortal could not approach the seal here. Originally, he planned to enter the ancient palace and find the demon bone, then throw it into the realm to hide it from the female immortal. But at this moment, he realized that he had been too naive. This seal did not only target the devil will, but it also completely sealed the divine soul. Ling Xiao could not communicate with the realm at all. He could not even sense his own soul see. How can this be? Ling Xiao stood in the palace, frowning slightly as he looked at a pitch-black stone coffin not far away. Could this demon bone be related to the divine soul? Otherwise, why would the female immortal spin a cocoon around herself and seal the power of the divine soul? However, in this way, it was a freak combination of factors that helped him achieve his goal. Inside the ancient palace, he did not have to worry about the female immortal's divine soul prying. In fact, as long as he stayed inside, no matter how long it took, he did not have to worry about being disturbed. Wonderful. Fate was indeed a mysterious thing. Now, all the settings seemed to have been prepared for Ling Xiao alone. This is probably what you people often say, destiny, right? But, the more it was like this, the less happy Ling Xiao's face was. Instead, there was a hint of gloominess. It was too much of a coincidence. Everything was so coincidental that it was unimaginable. How could an immortal who had sealed the demon bone and suppressed an entire realm be so careless as to allow him, the reincarnation of the sky demon, to approach the demon bone so easily? Anyone who could survive from the ancient times, regardless of whether it was a person or a remnant soul, which one of them wasn't scheming and scheming. But up until now, the immortal didn't seem to have any doubts about Ling Zhao's identity. Although it was a symbolic test, it seemed too perfunctory. However, if she had any ulterior motives, why would she wait until now? Ling Xiao frowned, pondered for a moment, and finally shook his head. He was determined to obtain the demon bone. Right now, he had to fuse with the demon bone as soon as possible and leave the secret realm. As for the female immortal, no matter what she was plotting, she was just a soul. The threat she posed to Ling Xiao was not as insurmountable as she had imagined. In the end, Ling Xiao walked up to the stone coffin and gently pushed open the coffin lid that had been sealed for countless years. Boom! Demonic qi gushed out of the ancient coffin like an ocean. The entire hall instantly turned into a sea of demonic qi. A wisp of saintly might fell from the sky, almost crushing Ling Xiao's figure to the ground. At this moment, endless demonic qi gathered into a vortex in the void above. A demonic figure gradually appeared in the vortex. It stood in the void with its hands behind its back, exuding an ancient domineering aura. Ling Xiao couldn't be more familiar with this figure. Although he still couldn't see its face clearly, who else could it be but the number one immemorial demon, the Sky Demon? Who else could it be? But at this moment, Ling Xiao's eyes didn't linger on the demonic figure for too long. Instead, he lowered his head to look inside the stone coffin. The next moment, his eyes suddenly focused. The demonic qi in the stone coffin gradually dissipated, revealing a sparkling and translucent white bone. It was a skull, or rather, a head. But what surprised Ling Xiao was that the color of the bone was so pure and sacred. There was even a wisp of divine will circulating in it, deriving countless mystical things out of thin air. The sun and moon sank and alternated. Immortal palaces rose and fell, and beautiful women danced. Ancient trees formed a sea, and great demons looked up to the sky. 3,000 immortals and demons knelt on the ground together. Everything seemed to be the beginning of the world, and the beginning of the primordial chaos. It also seemed like the end of an era, and everything returned to nothingness. Ling Xiao also heard nerves, Tao sounds, and demonic chants at the same time. In a daze, memories began to appear one after another. But this time, Ling Xiao was no longer a spectator, but the owner of these memories. Finally, the images stopped, and an ancient blue stone path descended from the sky. On both sides of the ancient path were endless clouds and a bottomless abyss. Ling Xiao frowned and looked at the end of the stone path, at a faintly discernible graceful figure. Suddenly, a sharp pain surged from the bottom of his heart. However, just as he lifted his foot and walked towards the mountain peak, the scene in front of him changed again. A murderous aura suddenly enveloped him. The Tao sounds rang together and the void trembled. Before Ling Xiao could react, he saw countless figures in golden armor holding numinous treasures in their hands, charging towards him from the sky. Endless murderous aura and eternal darkness. Time seemed to have stopped at this moment. Only that blood-stained figure was walking towards the sky step by step. There, a white-haired figure in green clothes gradually revealed her true form. That was a face so beautiful that it made one suffocate. Her snow-white hair contrasted with her snow-white skin. Her entire person was like an ice crystal, and her aura was flawless and otherworldly. Although her eyes were closed, the ice-blue flame totem between her eyebrows made one feel as if one's mind was being peeked at. She stood on the mountain peak, as if she had become one with the world. The clouds brushed past, but they could not bear to disturb her dreams. Just as Ling Xiao was in a daze, a heavenly might suddenly suppressed him from the void. It was a divine figure that was hundreds of feet tall. The golden saber in his hand slashed horizontally, and the saber intent pierced through the sky and landed on Ling Xiao's shoulder, sprinkling blood. Heaven and earth fell silent, and an absolute chill spread from the mountain peak. The white-haired woman standing on the mountain peak suddenly fluttered her eyelashes and slowly opened her eyes. It was a pair of ice-blue eyes. Just one look was enough to make one fall into depravity. Buzz! A terrifying aura began to rise, and countless Tao patterns turned into heavenly Tao shackles that snaked around the woman. In the void, a divine power that could be seen with the naked eye rippled. Everywhere it passed, the space froze and shattered like a mirror. The countless golden guards surrounding Ling Xiao did not even have time to react before they turned into statues along with the ancient bluestone path under their feet. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed. Even with his temperament, he felt a little scared at this moment. Freezing the world with one look? What kind of terrifying means is this? Just as he looked up at the mountain peak, he saw the woman's ice-blue eyes, which were filled with endless gentleness, landing on him. Buzz. Chapter 581. The 9 heavens fell into darkness at the same time, and all light was extinguished. There was a wisp of coldness at the end of the world. In just a short moment, the divine sun was gone, and the spiritual light was gone. Above the 9 heavens, the entire celestial world was covered in snow, as if winter had arrived. Countless powerful figures woke up from their slumber and cultivation. They stepped out of palaces, tombs, divine mountains, and cave residences, and looked into the distance. At the end of the celestial world, there was a towering snowy mountain that connected the heavens and the earth. At the peak of the snowy mountain, a magnificent stone palace stood quietly. However, unlike all the other celestial palaces in this world, this ancient palace was not golden, nor was it carved. It was a pitch-black stone palace, like a tomb, and it faintly emitted a desolate demonic aura. In the depths of the ancient hall, a mellow, ethereal, and sorrowful sigh resounded silently. "Is it you?" Boom. At the same time, in the immortals, Ling Xiao's eyes suddenly opened, mixed with a touch of confusion. Above his head, the jade-like demonic bone suddenly bloomed with divine light. In the next moment, the jade-like bone turned into a dazzling stream of light and flashed into Ling Xiao's sea of soul. Ah! Intense pain instantly came, and demonic aura surged out of Ling Xiao's eyes uncontrollably. Behind him, an ancient demonic figure seemed to have come from ancient times. Demonic runes that contained supreme truths began to light up in the palace, dazzling and dazzling. In the end, these runes transformed into a seal and disappeared between Ling Xiao's eyebrows. There, a blood-red demonic rune gradually became clear. It seemed to bind the most evil power in the world, capable of destroying heaven and earth and destroying all worlds. Demonic figures began to appear around Ling Xiao, as if there were 3,000 of them, and they all knelt down in worship. At this moment, his aura finally rose abruptly. Below the ancient palace, the female celestial looked up at the sky. Her clear eyes contained a touch of vicissitudes that did not match her appearance. There was no smile on her face, nor was there the slightest bit of fear. There was only an indescribable stubbornness. Xingzhou, central border. The 4 borders of the Xingzhou continent each spanned tens of thousands of miles. Only the central territory was not large. However, those who could occupy a spirit mountain and immortals' cave abodes and establish their own sects were all the top figures in the 5 territories. It was rumored that there was an immortal promotion plateau in the central territory, where the destiny of the Xingzhou continent was located. In the past, if Xingzhou experts wanted to ascend to the higher realms, they would have to step onto the immortal promotion plateau and attain the immortal Tao. Only then would they have a chance of being received. In other words, the immortal promotion plateau was the only place that connected the Xingzhou and the upper world. The spiritual qi here was rich, and the Taoist rhymes were formed naturally. The one who occupied this platform would be able to control the Xingzhou continent. At this moment, at the foot of a mountain at the center of the central territory, an azure-robed figure appeared in the void. Looking at the mountain peak in the distance, there was a trace of disappointment in her beautiful eyes. During this month, Yi Qingqian traveled all the way east in pursuit of the mystical Tao voice in her mind. Finally, she arrived in front of this immortal mountain. However, this celestial mountain was called Mount Enlightenment, and it was where the sacred sect was located. With Yi Qingqian's current strength, She was naturally at the top of the younger generation in the Xingzhou continent. However, in front of the colossus that was the sacred sect, she was simply too small and pitiful. No matter what, I have to try my best. Yi Qingqian took a deep breath, and her figure suddenly disappeared on the spot. At the same time, at the peak of the immortal mountain, a golden-robed figure suddenly opened his eyes. Sunlight flowed, and patterns of the great Tao rippled in his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled into an inexplicable smile. Whoosh! Yi Qingqian's figure floated past like a mountain breeze. Unlike the danger she had imagined, she did not see a single disciple of the sacred sect along the way. She did not even encounter a formation spirit seal. It was not until her figure appeared on a perilous peak in the back mountain that her footsteps slowed down. At the end of her line of sight was an ancient bluestone altar. The altar was about 10 feet tall, with octagonal cornices. There were many mystical runes carved on it. Upon closer inspection, Tao will flowed, and an immortal aura was born. Above the altar, an ancient bronze token floated quietly, emitting a dense light. If Ling Xiao was here, he would be extremely shocked to see this token. That was because this ancient token was extremely similar to the cold moon divine token in his hand. Are you the one who summoned me? Yi Qingqian frowned slightly, walked up to the altar, and looked up at the bronze token. At that moment, a sudden change occurred. The altar, which originally did not have a trace of spiritual light, suddenly had a divine cloud shoot into the sky. It turned into a large formation, trapping Yi Qingqian's figure in it. Yi Qingqian's pretty face froze. She grabbed the ancient token, and spiritual light surged around her, and an extremely cold aura instantly rippled out. However, her current strength was only at the Divine King realm. How could she break out of the prison that the Divine Master of the sacred sect had personally set up? Therefore, when the cold light collided with the spiritual formation, Yi Qingqian's face turned pale, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of her mouth. Do you remember? In the golden palace far away, the Divine Master stood with his hands behind his back, looking in the direction of the back mountain. There was a dazzling golden pillar that pierced through the sky, standing at the peak of the mountain. Yes, Divine Master. Behind him, a young girl who was also dressed in a golden robe and had a picturesque appearance bowed slightly and replied softly. The young girl looked to be in her early 20s. She had thin shoulders, a slender waist, and a slender figure. As she looked around, there was a cold arrogance in her eyes. She wore a dazzling golden robe with clouds embroidered on it. It was tied at the waist, and her hair was simple, casually draped over her shoulders, adding a fresh and elegant gentleness to her. Just by standing there, she seemed to be surrounded by heavenly music, and divine birds flew around her. She looked like a fairy from the heavens who had descended to the world. Your divine body has never been seen before. I used 280 years to purify the impurities in your body, and another 20 years to teach you cultivation methods and remarkable abilities. Now, the entire Xingzhou knows that there is a saint in the sacred sect, but no one has seen your true appearance. You must remember that you must repay the karma in this world. If you want to reach the peak of the immortal path, you must cut off all distracting thoughts and ignore the secular world. The Divine Master turned his head and looked deeply at the young girl. Yes, I will remember. From today onwards, I will go into seclusion for at least 10 years, and the longest will be 100 years. You must not tell anyone about this. You will temporarily act as the Divine Master of the sacred sect's command. You can make any decision on your own. You can dispatch the experts of the sacred sect as you wish. I will use this as an excuse to inform the sacred sect. This will be your training. As soon as he finished speaking, the Divine Master suddenly threw out an object, which landed in front of the young girl. His figure disappeared from the front of the hall. The young girl took the divine order and bowed. When she got up again, her face was covered by clouds, hiding her true appearance. She turned around and walked into the palace. Dao Comprehension Back Mountain. The Divine Master's figure flashed out, and the entire mountain peak suddenly bloomed with clouds, which turned into a spiritual array and enveloped the entire mountain peak. His gaze, however, had already landed on the azure-clothed girl on the altar. I have waited for you for 300 years. You are finally back. Hearing this, a cold light flashed in Yi Qingchan's eyes. The ancient bronze order in her hand gave off a divine glow, which blocked all the spiritual power between heaven and earth. Chapter 582. It seems that you haven't fully recovered. The Divine Master shook his head and smiled. Golden light rippled in his eyes. But it doesn't matter. You are no longer a threat to me. So, don't struggle anymore. Who exactly are you? Yi Qingchan frowned slightly, and her eyes were full of indifference. She had not fully recovered her memories. In other words, she was no longer the Yi Qingchan from the moment she chose to devour that ancient soul. Right now, she was the young master's Qingchan, not that mysterious ancient powerhouse. Who am I? I often ask myself this question. The Divine Master looked up at the sky with a calm expression. Yi Qingchan, in fact, I should thank you. If you hadn't separated Aro and me back then, perhaps I wouldn't have developed hatred for you, and wouldn't have schemed to become stronger. Now, all the living beings in this world are bowing down to me and treating me as their master. That ant from the lower realm that you didn't care about has become the immortal god that decides your life. Don't you think it's funny? Aro? Yi Qingchan's eyes flickered. A fair and beautiful face gradually appeared in front of her eyes. Although she had forgotten many things, it seemed that this woman had once caused her great pain. Do you know what's the funniest thing? Until now, Aro still thinks that she was the one who let you go and helped you reincarnate. She doesn't know that everything is within my expectations. The Divine Master sneered. The indifferent expression on his face suddenly turned ferocious. You are very powerful. So powerful that I didn't dare to take any risk. So, I helped you reincarnate and asked you to recultivate so that I could have more time to prepare. This way, even if you reincarnate and the Foliaceae knew about it, it would be useless. Yi Qingchan, now, you should help me with one last thing. Zhou Yendao. Yi Qingchan suddenly raised her head and looked at the Divine Master of the sacred sect, who was smiling coldly. A cold light flashed across her beautiful eyes. Extreme coldness whistled and formed a vortex. It almost froze the space into ice. The golden light above the altar stopped. It looked like it was about to shatter. You finally remember me. The Divine Lord nodded indifferently, his eyes filled with mockery. Time is truly a mysterious thing. Who would have thought that the high and mighty Lord of Yi would one day lose his memories? You want to borrow my hand to open the immortal promotion plateau? Yi Qingchan looked at the immortal medallion in her hand. Her entire temperament began to become ethereal and cold. It was clear that she had thought of something at this moment. You're wrong. For the past 300 years, I have been in a trance all the time. I am afraid that the experts of the Foliaceae will know about your reincarnation and come to investigate. However, I can only refine half of the mark of the Foliaceae in the floating sky token. So, I need to use your divine soul and bloodline to completely seal this world. The immortal leader sighed. In this world, I am already undefeatable. Plus, there are treasures here that can shake the 9 heavens. Why would I open the platform of immortality? Creation that shakes the 9 heavens. Yi Qingchan's eyes flashed with confusion. I used 10 years to scheme against Bai Jiro, and another 300 years to truly step out of the shackles of the world. As long as I can seal this world and obtain that good fortune, I will achieve immortality. Your Yi clan, what can you do to me? By then, I will be able to break the seal at any time. Why would I need your help? I understand. Yi Qingchan nodded. A tall figure in white appeared in her mind. The corners of her mouth curled into a smile. You can't do it. Can't do it? In the entire Xingzhou, you are the only one who poses a threat to me. Who else can be my opponent? Yi Qingqian, you don't have to struggle anymore. Although I can't completely seal this world, I have set up countless means to stop the operation of the formation in this world in the past 300 years. Now, as long as I refine you and this divine token, this world will submit to me. Boom! The Divine Master shouted coldly. Divine light shot into the sky from his body. Lines of the great path fell from the sky, turning into the shadow of a furnace that enveloped the entire mountain peak. A terrifying power spread out. In a breath's time, the grass and trees were turned into ashes. Even the void was shattered into countless pitch-black cracks. I'm afraid you can't refine me. Yi Qingqian chuckled. Her eyes were filled with coldness. Divine light also flickered around her body. In her hand, the ancient bronze medallion floated in the air. It emitted a boundless azure sun. Its divine power pierced through the sky and blocked the furnace's power. I've waited for 300 years. Yi Qingqian, let's see how long you can last. The Divine Master shook his head. He sat down cross-legged and formed a seal with his hands. He lifted the furnace into the sky. With his strength, killing Yi Qingqian would be easy. But once he did so, the Foliaceae of the upper world would know. This was the reason why he had let a wisp of her spirit go through reincarnation. In order to completely seal this world, he had to use his divine power to refine Yi Qingqian's spirit. Then, he would use the Foliaceae's divine medallion as a guide to destroy the immortal ascension platform. Only then would the Xingzhou continent truly fall into his hands. Then, he would be able to search for the creation with peace of mind. Everyone said that this world had been sealed by someone and no one could step out of the Emperor realm. But he did it. The reason for this was because of that divine item. According to what Zhou Yendao knew, he was not the only divine item sealed in the holy state. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, 1 month had passed. In the immortal world, Ling Zhao's demonic aura was completely restrained. He was like a boulder and did not emit any power. At this moment, a strange demonic rune flickered on his forehead. There seemed to be a divine shadow within it. Demons and spirits roared together. But in the end, they were all suppressed by the rune. At the same time, a demonic sun appeared in Ling Zhao's soul sea, releasing endless demonic aura. At a closer look, there was an ancient rune floating quietly in the middle of the demonic sun. The pressure from it was terrifying, as if it could suppress eternity. It revealed a domineering aura. The primordial sky demon was born in the first darkness of the primordial age. This demonic rune was the sky demon's companion spiritual item, the primordial ancestral rune. But now it was not complete. But even so, Ling Xiao was still unable to activate the true power of the ancestral rune with his current strength. In particular, the origin energy contained in it transcended the Tao laws and vaguely had an unparalleled domineering aura. With this rune in his soul sea, Ling Xiao believed that no one in this world could break his soul sea and seize his divine will. It's time to go out. Ling Xiao stood up and looked at the distant sky. Although he still did not know who the white-haired woman in his soul sea was. In fact, at this moment, he had already forgotten what she looked like. But that absolute coldness was inexplicably familiar. Moreover, the memories that could be engraved in the depths of the primordial sky demon's soul sea must be the most ingrained and persistent thoughts. Ling Xiao had an inexplicable feeling that the woman was still alive. Moreover, it must be closely related to his identity. There was a faint but clear bloodline feeling. Will she be able to sense my presence? Chapter 583. The primordial sky demon was not tolerated by the 9 heavens. When it died, even its bones were dismantled and sealed by the immortals. It was obvious how terrifying this demon was in the eyes of those experts at the peak of the immortal Tao. Even so, it was still dead. Even the Sky Demon Palace was destroyed in the long river of history. No one would believe that there wasn't a hint of a conspiracy behind this. Therefore, Ling Xiao was more or less worried. When he merged with the Sky Demon's eye, Liang Yi once said that the higher his cultivation, the easier it would be for those immortals to detect him. As for the white-haired woman, she was now a huge variable to Ling Xiao. After all, Ling Xiao did not know whether she was a friend or a foe. Although she killed countless immortal soldiers with a thought in his divine sense, those immortal soldiers did not seem real. However, those immortal armaments did not seem to be real. Instead, they seemed more like the sealing power of the palace hall. And the Sky Demon was not the primordial Sky Demon, but the manifestation of Ling Xiao's divine sense. Only that woman seemed to have existed since ancient times. She stood at the peak of the mountain and did not change because of anything. It was getting more and more confusing. Everything in front of him was like a big net. And now, Ling Xiao seemed to be outside the net, but also like he had never escaped. But why did it feel so familiar? It was not only the inexplicable bloodline feeling, but also the absolute coldness. Forget it, it's useless to think too much. I'll ask Xiong Huan and the others when I get out of here. In the end, Ling Xiao did not think too much and walked out of the palace. That immortal must have grown impatient from waiting for so long. Boom! When Ling Xiao walked out of the ancient palace, the majestic golden palace behind him suddenly turned into flowing light and shattered in an instant. The entire immortal world began to be filled with divine light, releasing a dazzling brilliance as if it were a dream. In just one breath, the ancient forest and immortal trees all turned into bubbles and disappeared rapidly before Ling Xiao's eyes. Soon after, the outline of a divine mountain appeared. On the peak of the mountain, the female immortal stood with her hands behind her back, coldly looking at the young man in front of her. Not bad. I really didn't expect that you would be able to suppress the devil bone so smoothly. It's all thanks to Senior's spirit array and the inherited cold moon cultivation method. Ling Xiao smiled indifferently, as if he did not see the joy in the female immortal's eyes. If this array formation and cultivation technique were useful, I wouldn't have been trapped here for 900 years. Hearing this, the immortal clan woman shook her head slightly and looked at Ling Xiao. In the depths of her eyes, there was a trace of heartfelt fear. So, Senior knows that I'm coming, and also knows what I'm here for? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows. At this moment, he no longer pretended to be confused. He guessed that this immortal woman must be plotting something, but he still couldn't figure out why she was so sure that someone would come to the immortals to look for the demonic bone. Her strength was clearly higher than the settings of this realm, but even she was powerless against this demonic bone, let alone these lower realm ants. I don't know. That's why I waited for 900 years. The immortal clan woman smiled sweetly. Her eyes were filled with vicissitudes of life. I spent the best 900 years of my life in this arcane pocket realm. I even abandoned my clan members, abandoned my fleshly body, and used my bloodline as a prison to suppress this devil bone. What do you think I'm doing? Ling Xiao? Actually, you don't need to be confused. From the moment you sat on the faceless Heavenly Book's memorial tablet, I knew it was you and it wasn't you. The immortal clan woman sighed softly with her hands behind her back. She seemed to be surrounded by immortal qi. Right now, her body was inexplicably thin, but there was also an unyielding determination. So, that spiritual Dan, Ling Xiao frowned slightly. He could feel the woman's fear towards the Sky Demon. That kind of fear made her not dare to say the words, Sky Demon. But, it's me and it's not me? This sentence made Ling Xiao feel inexplicably touched. From the day I arrived here, I destroyed my physical body, passed down my cultivation method, and created the ancient sect of Cold Moon. First, it was to hide my identity and prevent those suspicious old bastards from finding out. I came here to suppress the demonic bone. Second, my physical body was just destroyed. My soul is a little unstable. This palace of cold moon can provide me with spiritual materials and resources to help me recover my strength. As for the spiritual Dan, I was afraid that you couldn't find this place. That's why I took out some bait to lure you here. The celestial woman smiled warmly. However, Ling Xiao felt an inexplicable chill at this moment. Aren't you afraid that your plan will backfire and others will take advantage of it? Ling Xiao frowned. To be honest, he had a lot of doubts in his heart. This immortal clan woman's strength was terrifying and her methods were heavenly. But how did she know that he would enter the immortal world this time? Plus, Han Qingqiu had transformed for 17 years. She was the same age as him. Isn't this too much of a coincidence? How do you think she could transform and walk out of the secret territory without me? The immortal clan woman suddenly smiled playfully. The way she looked at Ling Xiao was like she was looking at an ant. This gaze made Ling Xiao's heart grow colder. This was the so-called ancient powerhouse. Her intelligence was close to that of a demon's and her wisdom was unparalleled. All of your actions were calculated by them. Someone once said that even if a dog has lived for thousands of years, its mind is not something a normal person can imagine. How laughable that there are people who think that villains should be reckless and kill people everywhere they go. If Ling Xiao did that, he would be noticed and killed immediately. But even if he was careful, it seems like he still fell into this immortal clan woman's chess game. It's not that he was careless. It's just that this chess game was set up a long time ago. 900 years. This process was long enough for the chess pieces to hide their identities and blend into the game. They might be useless in normal times, but with just one move they could change the whole game. That spiritual pill was concocted by me, and it was nurtured by the previous generations of Frost Moon Palace masters. Our relationship was extremely deep. The secret of becoming an immortal was also spread by me. I personally killed Yu Luyun. I had long known that the holy sect had always been trying to take control of the celestial palace. Thus, I casually gave them a good fortune. After all, those who can guard this world are mostly from my clan. But with such a coincidence, the spiritual pill will definitely think that Yu died in the hands of the holy sect. When she leaves this world, she will definitely seek revenge. And the people she can ally with are definitely not people of the righteous Tao. I only need to use a little trick to make her believe that only the true demon can help her take revenge. So, she will take the initiative to help me find you and bring you to the Cold Moon Palace. As long as you are here, how can you miss out on this opportunity? The female immortal's eyes flashed with deep meaning. In this world, no one can take that step out of the shackles, unless their original body is of the same origin as the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, or they can refine the sacred inheritance of my foliaceae. Even if the spiritual pill falls into the hands of others, it will not be a threat to my existence. As for this immortal medallion, I asked you to put it in the hands of someone she trusts and spread the secret of the immortals. It is just a precaution. If the spiritual pill is accidentally exposed, there will be people who know that the demon bone is sealed in the immortals. To you, this is an irresistible temptation. So, I believe that you will come sooner or later. I understand. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. From the beginning, he knew that Han Qingqiu's original body was a 9th-grade spiritual pill. However, her hatred for the holy sect was real. Her reverence for the previous Cold Moon Palace master was also real. So, as a chess piece, her identity did not arouse Ling Xiao's suspicion. As for the good fortune in this immortal land, since he was a devil, he would eventually come to find this demon bone. And this female immortal only needed to wait here, waiting for him to come. Even if there was no Han Qingqiu, Ling Xiao would still walk the same path. It was just that it might be a little later, or it might be a little more complicated. Han Qingqiu fell into his hands. Even if she was eaten, it would increase his strength. To this female immortal, the stronger Ling Xiao was, the easier it would be for her plan to succeed. As for Yu Xiao, according to Ling Xiao's thoughts, even if she did not die in his hands, she would most likely become a new chess piece in this female immortal's hands after entering the immortal's world. She might even clear the obstacles for him and escort him, just so that he could finally enter the ruins. In this place, this female immortal was indeed a supreme existence. It was easy for her to control a god-emperor. Whether it was the immortal medallion or the inheritance of cultivation techniques, since this female immortal knew Ling Xiao's identity, she would definitely have a way to attract him. However, Chapter 584. I still have two things that I don't understand. I hope Senior can help me. Ling Xiao's expression was indifferent, without the slightest hint of panic. But in the eyes of the female immortal, this calmness was more like a surrender to fate. Her cultivation had already surpassed that of this realm. Even if her physical body was destroyed, her spirit was not something an emperor god could fight against. Moreover, the sky demon reincarnated in front of her had not even reached the first divine king realm. So, how could he fight against her? I know. The female immortal nodded. Do you want to ask me how I knew you would come at this time? No. I would like to know, how did you know that I would definitely appear in this world? Ling Xiao shook his head. It seemed that Han Qingqiu was just an insignificant chess piece. Whether she could find him or not was completely based on luck. And the responsibility of the people of Cold Moon Immortal Palace was to spread the news that the immortal world contained the secret of immortal ascension and sealed the great demon. But the precondition for all this was that the female immortal knew he would appear in this world. For ordinary cultivators, the words "great demon" were taboo. Even if the demon bone contained unparalleled mysteries, no one would easily think about it. In other words, perhaps only the reincarnated sky demon would be interested in the demon bone. Otherwise, even with the female immortal's strength, she could not completely refine the demon bone, let alone others. But how could she be so sure that he would appear in this world? After all, according to Xiong Huan and Liang Yi, this world was vast and endless, and the Xingzhou was just one of thousands of worlds. How did the female immortal know that he would be reincarnated and appear here? Suddenly, Ling Xiao thought of a possibility. Liang Yi. There is a demon general in the Heavenly Demon Palace. His title is Evil Dragon, but most people call him the Demon General of Samsara. Back then, when the immortal race's army destroyed the old subordinates of the Heavenly Demon Palace, it just so happened that the Yi clan was ordered to kill him. The female immortal explained calmly and patiently. Perhaps it was the loneliness of 1,000 years that filled her heart. It was also possible that she was still hesitating. In short, she didn't seem to be in a hurry to attack Ling Xiao. In other words, she was confident that Ling Xiao would not be able to escape from her grasp. As expected, Ling Xiao nodded and heaved a sigh of relief. From the looks of it, this female immortal must have set up a trap when Liang Yi was reincarnated. That was why she was able to track his aura and not Liang Yi's betrayal. With the woman's temperament, this was nothing to be shocked about. 1,000 years of planning, just for a single day. Such extravagance and boldness truly caused one to feel somewhat terrified. However, she was, at most, an unremarkable character in the immortal clan. Yet, she still had such wisdom. One could only imagine how terrifying the ancient gods who had truly killed the sky demon and now controlled the 9 heavens were. This path was truly fraught with danger. Only a corner of heaven and earth was revealed, but it was a 1,000-year-old conspiracy. When Liang Yi destroyed his own cultivation and entered the cycle of reincarnation, I left a spirit mark on his body. Although this mark eventually dissipated, the location was in the Xingzhou wasteland. The female immortal's eyes flashed with a smile. My Foliaceae and Liang Yi's evil dragon guards have fought for hundreds of years. I have a good understanding of him. Given his temperament, when the Sky Demon died, he would have sacrificed his last drop of blood to avenge it. However, he entered the cycle of reincarnation, so I guess that he is waiting for the Sky Demon to return. 900 years ago, when I arrived here, I did not find the evil dragon general. Instead, I met Xionghuan, who was hiding here, and this Sky Demon's skull. So, this is probably fate and also an opportunity for my Foliaceae. 17 years ago, this demon bone suddenly let out a shocking buzzing sound, and various strange phenomena appeared in the immortal world. So, I guess that you had returned. Of course, I admit that I took a gamble, but now it seems that I made the right bet. At this moment, the female immortal's face was clearly filled with lingering fear. One could only imagine how terrifying the demon bone's strange phenomenon was. According to Ling Zhao's speculation, the strange phenomenon might have been caused by the origin ancestral symbol, and not the demon bone. After all, when he merged with the Sky Demon's eye, Liang Yi, Xing Shen, and the others did not mention any strange phenomenon. But no matter what, he was exposed. Now, he finally understood why Han Qingqiu transformed 17 years ago, and how this female immortal knew that he would appear in the Xingzhou at this time. Last question. Ling Xiao took a deep breath, his expression still calm. Senior, you are a member of the immortal race, and your cultivation is strong. Now that the immortal race controls the world, you should enjoy the respect of all races. Why do you have to do this? At this point, Ling Xiao had a rough idea of what this celestial woman was up to by setting up such a trap. Now that her physical body was shattered and the demon bone was suppressed, she could not merge the skull into her body. Or perhaps, what she wanted was not a mere demon bone, but the reincarnation of the Sky Demon. So, she guarded this place and waited for an opportunity to possess and be reborn. But once she did that, she would become the new Sky Demon, and the 9 heavens would not tolerate her. Based on this female immortal's methods and temperament, she must have been a strong cultivator even in ancient times. Now that the immortal race was at its peak, why did she want to go against the heavens? Yes, I also thought that my Foliaceae should be respected by all races and enjoy the glory of this golden age. The female immortal smiled bitterly, her starry eyes filled with sorrow. Back when the immortal race killed the primordial Sky Demon, my Foliaceae was the vanguard, and all 13 ancestors died. It was a tragic battle. I thought that after the Sky Demon Palace was destroyed and the 9 heavens were at peace, my Foliaceae would be rewarded by the ancient gods and might even be given the immortal source. But who would have thought that my Foliaceae would be exiled to the Azure world because we were no longer powerful? The most ridiculous thing was that my race did not even get the position of the realm master of a small kiliacosm. We were only given a few small worlds and had to bear the responsibility of suppressing the demon bone. How can I explain this to the Foliaceae's ancestors? This is an insult to my Foliaceae. Since the immortal race is heartless, why should I be loyal? The Sky Demon bone was born from the primordial origin. As long as I have your physical body, I will have the chance to become the ruler of the world. At that time, the immortal race can be destroyed with a wave of my hand. Immortal source. Ling Xiao frowned slightly, his eyes seeming to be deep in thought. It was obvious that the female immortal in front of him was resentful because of the unequal distribution of the spoils. But from her words, Ling Xiao faintly sensed a hint of a conspiracy. If he became a demon, the immortal race could be destroyed with a wave of his hand? Then how did the real Sky Demon die? Okay, I've said so much. Actually, it's because I'm a little hesitant. I've waited for this day for 900 years, but when it really came, I realized that becoming a demon also requires courage. The female immortal shook her head and sighed softly. But when she looked at Ling Xiao again, There was no longer any hesitation in her eyes. Ling Xiao, give your physical body to me. In this world, I will bring you back to the 9 heavens. Chapter 585. Since you've been planning this for 1,000 years, I'm sure you won't let me go so easily. So, what are you waiting for? Ling Xiao's expression was indifferent as he stared coldly at the woman before him. He didn't summon Xiong Huan and the others. After all, it would be difficult for Xiong Huan and the others to fight against this female immortal. However, since she wanted Ling Xiao's body, she wouldn't destroy it so easily. As long as she entered his soul seed, haha, I don't care if you're an immortal or a god. I can kill you. Buzz. Ling Xiao, no. Lord Sky Demon, I won't let you down. I'll spread darkness to the 9 heavens. The female immortal's face was filled with respect. As expected of the primordial Sky Demon. He was magnanimous. He knew when to pick up and when to let go. Since that's the case, I won't hold back. Vast divine power roared into the sky. Thunderclouds suddenly covered the entire immortal world, and Tao patterns appeared. Unparalleled spiritual fluctuations turned into waves that surged out, crashing down on Ling Xiao's head. However, there was no trace of panic on the young man's face. There was even a hint of playfulness in his eyes. Not only did Ling Xiao not stop this soul consciousness from entering the palace, he even suppressed the power of the primordial Pangu stone and the primordial ancestral symbol. Until the female immortal's figure appeared in Ling Xiao's soul sea. The indifference on her face slowly froze. Especially the majestic black palace that stood in the middle of the soul palace. It was like a pillar that supported the heavens that pierced through the void. It inexplicably caused her delicate body to tremble and her mind to ripple. The God Emperor's soul palace? Moreover, why was the soul palace's aura so strange? It had the power to suppress one's divine spirit? Also, what was with the demonic sun in the soul palace? With just one look, the female immortal felt chills all over her body. Had the entire world fallen into darkness? Buzz. An ear-piercing buzz resounded. The female immortal's soul light suddenly shone brightly. Only then did she stop the demonic intent that contained destruction. However, at this moment, her face was already filled with shock. Just one look and her soul had almost shattered. With this female immortal's experience, she naturally knew that it was extremely dangerous to enter another's soul sea as a soul body. However, she was the ancestor of the Foliaceae. 1,000 years ago, she was a figure who could move unhindered through the world. How could she possibly put a 16 or 17-year-old boy in her eyes? The primordial Sky Demon was the strongest in the 9 heavens, but what he was strong about was his physical body. Since when was his godly soul so terrifying? Senior, are you surprised? Ling Xiao's figure sat upright on top of the soul palace as he coldly looked at the woman who stood rooted to the ground. He was no match for this immortal. In fact, in the outside world, this immortal only needed to move a finger to consign him to eternal damnation. But from the very beginning, Ling Xiao knew that she had set the stage for nothing. No matter how perfect the plan was, there would always be a flaw. Even if this female immortal had personally witnessed the primordial Sky Demon's unparalleled power, she had still underestimated this peerless demon that had been born at the beginning of the world. Or rather, she had calculated everything, but she had not considered that Ling Xiao had transmigrated and had the Pangu stone guarding his soul sea. She had also not expected that this demon bone that she had been sealing all this time contained a strand of the Sky Demon's consciousness that had yet to be extinguished. Now, this strand of consciousness had evolved into the origin ancestral symbol. Even a true supremacy or saint might not be able to escape unscathed from Ling Xiao's soul sea, let alone a mere remnant soul. How is this possible? Who exactly are you? The female immortal's eyes widened, but she calmed down in an instant. No matter who you are, this body is still mine. As soon as she finished speaking, divine patterns flickered in her eyes. They looked as if they were made of gold, majestic and vast. Dazzling golden light filled heaven and earth, trying to disperse the endless darkness. Seeing this, Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled. With a thought, demonic intent spewed out from the ancestral symbol in the void, evolving into the origin Tao pattern. Then, a demonic shadow that seemed to have come from ancient times quietly stood behind Ling Xiao. "Senior, if you want to kill me, I really won't be able to fight back. But you've made a mistake by underestimating the demon bone's power." Boom! The demonic shadow gradually merged with Ling Xiao's body, and the latter's figure suddenly grew several feet taller, standing at the peak of the sky. Terrifying demonic intent roared around his body, and any strand of it could transform into the birth and death of an era. And on his forehead, a black rune seemed to be carved, containing the power to destroy heaven and earth. Origin Tao pattern. Primordial ancestral symbol. The female immortal exclaimed, and the golden light in her beautiful eyes trembled. "Senior, thank you for protecting this demonic bone ancestral symbol for me for thousands of years. Now give me your divine soul as well." Ling Xiao smiled faintly. Demonic light shot out from his forehead, turning into an ancient rune that fell on the female immortal's head. On the rune, countless mysterious and complex demonic patterns gradually spread out. Strand by strand, they formed a formation in the void. There seemed to be 3,000 demons roaring, and the majestic demonic aura almost tore the sky apart. The golden light around the female immortal only lasted for a moment before it was completely suppressed by the demonic intent. How is this possible? Why is the primordial ancestral symbol with you? Wasn't it destroyed by the 9 immortal sources? She couldn't figure out how this origin Tao pattern could be reborn with Ling Xiao. During the Great War of Immortals and Demons, the immemorial Sky Demon killed the 9 immortal masters and 100,000 immortal soldiers with a thought. Everyone fought with their lives and released their immortal sources to completely destroy this ancestral symbol. But why did it appear in Ling Xiao's soul sea? That's right. This primordial ancestral symbol shouldn't appear with me. It's just a wisp of the ancestral symbol's remnant consciousness. But it's enough to kill you. Ling Xiao's eyes were clear as he spoke indifferently. From the moment he merged with this ancestral symbol, he knew that it wasn't complete. It was only after thousands of years of nourishment from this female immortal that a wisp of its power was awakened. Although Ling Xiao didn't know what the immortal sources she was talking about were, it was clear that although the symbol was destroyed, it didn't dissipate. Instead, it was hidden in the Sky Demon's divine sense. Impossible! Impossible! The female immortal screamed, looking miserable. How could she allow her plan to be destroyed so easily after thousands of years of planning? But the primordial ancestral symbol was the Sky Demon's companion item. It was said that this symbol contained the primordial origin and could punish the heavenly Tao. Now that she was only a wisp of her remnant soul, how could she fight against it? Since ancient times, all the people who controlled the origin ancestral symbol were the most powerful people who could set the rules of this world. How could such a powerful force be controlled by a divine overlord? To be honest, she was filled with regret. She was the ancestor of the Foliaceae with a supreme cultivation level. But in the end, she was schemed against by a divine overlord. No wonder this young man's expression was so calm from the beginning. She had thought that he had compromised with fate, but now, it seemed that he was luring her to let down her guard. If she had been more cautious and sent a wisp of her divine sense into his soul sea, she wouldn't have been in such a predicament. But it seemed that she could only fight to the death. Chapter 586. Senior, if you sacrifice your soul to me, I will redress the injustice of your Foliaceae. How about that? Ling Xiao stood with his hands behind his back, demonic intent surging in his eyes. The grand primordium rune finally covered the sky and pressed down on the female immortal. Foliaceae? Suddenly, a trace of doubt appeared in Ling Xiao's heart. Could this female immortal be related to Qing Chan? Ling Xiao still didn't fully understand the latter's background. However, she came from the upper realm and was now inextricably linked to the sacred sect. Ling Xiao had also heard the female immortal mention that the sacred sect was the guardian of this realm and was of the same race as this female immortal. Gradually, a complicated picture unfolded in front of Ling Xiao's eyes. However, it was still full of mysteries that he couldn't see clearly. If they were of the same race, then why did the sacred sect's divine master send someone to kill Qing Chan? Moreover, why was he looking for a Tao prodigy? In your dreams, I Yi Luoyun will never lose. Just as Ling Xiao was pondering, the female immortal suddenly roared at the sky. Soul light rushed into the clouds and formed the phantom of a divine mountain. Tao patterns spread over it, transforming into forests and ancient trees. Immortal intent flowed, making it look like a divine realm. Then, she reached out with her slender hand and lifted the 1,000-foot-tall mountain, smashing it at Ling Xiao. The void shattered instantly, and terrifying divine patterns intertwined. The dark soul sea suddenly lit up as bright as day, and spatial cracks almost pierced through the sky. However, the grand primordium rune contained primordial immortal power, the origin of all realms. With Yi Luoyun's current strength, there was no way he could fight against this rune. Boom! Boom! The golden mountain trembled, and the divine patterns shattered. Endless rays of light fell from the sky like the Milky Way. It was majestic, but also somewhat bleak. The instant the divine mountain and the ancient rune collided, Ling Xiao's face turned pale. An indescribable power surged in the sky above his soul sea. Thousands of Tao wills were obliterated, and there was no more black and yellow. It was like the end of the world. But in the end, when the ancient seal covered the sky and enveloped the divine mountain, a scalp-numbing sound of friction resounded. Then, cracks began to appear on the sacred mountain. Yi Luoyun's eyes were instantly filled with fear and unwillingness. 900 years. She sealed her own cultivation and fell into this world. Then, he used his physical body and bloodline as a seal to deceive the celestial races of the heavens, using the ground as a prison. 900 years. She abandoned her clansmen and pretended to be righteous. He betrayed the immortal race and attempted to become a demon, all for the sake of seeking justice for the ancestors of the Foliaceae. Yi Luoyun had never thought of using his demonic body to kill people. She only felt that the ancient gods were unfair, and that the Foliaceae were shamed. The so-called immortals were just the clans that were bestowed with immortal opportunities by the innate spirits, and not the slave clans that they had sworn to follow with their lives. That was right. In the eyes of true immortals, they were nothing more than slaves. They simply did not have the qualifications to rule the world together with them. But in the end, it was a mistake. She could not become the immortal that led the Foliaceae to stand at the top of the world, nor could she become the demon that conquered the world with the immortal race. Yi Luoyun raised her head and looked at the crumbling sacred mountain. Her beautiful eyes were filled with unwillingness and resentment. I can't accept this. I can't accept this. Blazing soul light began to bloom from her body. An incomparably vast divine power instantly swept through the entire soul sea. If it weren't for the ancient Pangustone, Ling Xiao would most likely have been killed by this power. Even so, blood still trickled down from the corner of his mouth. Boom! Boom! Yi Luoyun screamed fiercely. The soul light around her turned into a sea that surged and poured into the crumbling sacred mountain. Even so, the ancient seal formed by the grand primordium ancient talisman still pressed down on her unhurriedly. No! No! Shrill and despairing screams continued to resound. Demonic intent surged around Ling Xiao, but his eyes were surprisingly calm. Yi Luoyun wouldn't be able to escape death, but he probably wouldn't be able to enjoy the soul of an immortal powerhouse. After all, the final counterattack of a person who had transcended this realm was bound to be earth-shattering. If he wasn't careful, he would be consigned to eternal damnation. Villains prioritized benefits above all else. However, the prerequisite for obtaining benefits was that they had to stay alive. Time passed slowly. The golden light around Yi Luoyun gradually dimmed. However, she still didn't give up. She bitterly supported the sacred mountain so that it wouldn't shatter. Otherwise, once the grand primordium ancient talisman fell, she would definitely die. However, there was still an end to her stubbornness, until an ear-piercing boom suddenly came from the void in the distance. Yi Luoyun's eyes narrowed slightly as she looked toward the source of the sound. She saw Ling Xiao slashing down with the demonic blade in his hand. The heaven-punishing style was formed in an instant. It transformed into a 100-foot-long saber intent that neatly cut the space into pieces. The world devastator Dao Law manifested thousands of avatars. Every inch of saber light seemed to shatter an immortal realm and collapse a divine palace. Crack! As for the divine mountain that supported the ancient seal, it was finally split apart by this blade and scattered into the sun. Boom! The grand primordium ancient talisman fell from the sky and completely suppressed the entire space where Yi Luoyun was. No! At the last moment, Yi Luoyun's expression was filled with despair. Her entire soul suddenly shattered as she tried to shake the grand primordium ancient talisman. However, in the end, it was forcefully shattered by the ancient talisman's destructive power. An ancient powerhouse with thousands of schemes turned into a wisp of soul energy and dissipated into nothingness. Buzz! A buzzing sound reverberated throughout the world. The black palace in Yi Luoyun's soul sea suddenly grew dozens of feet taller. Soul power rippled from it as mystical runes spread out from it. Ling Zhao's eyes narrowed slightly. He sat cross-legged on the spot and tried his best to devour the scattered soul energy in his soul sea. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. When Ling Xiao opened his eyes, there wasn't a trace of aura around him. However, the soul energy contained in his starry eyes caused the space to tremble and the sun and moon to sink. 7th stage Divine Emperor? Ling Xiao raised his head and looked at the crumbling space around him. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Now that his divine spirit had reached the 7th stage, ordinary divine emperors would be no match for him if he went all out. Of course, from the beginning to the end, Ling Xiao had never regarded the god emperors of this world as his opponents. In the holy state, he only had one opponent, the sacred sect's divine master. Buzz! With Yi Luoyun's death, the ancient array covering the barren mountain immediately shattered. The space trembled and dissipated into clouds. Ling Zhao's figure appeared on the mountain peak. However, there wasn't much joy on his face right now. This trip to the immortals seemed to have been fruitful, but Ling Xiao felt a new sense of danger. Yes, he'd fused with the demon bone and killed Yi Luoyun. However, if the Sky Demon's skull hadn't contained a wisp of the Sky Demon's divine will that eventually evolved into the origin ancestral symbol, he might not have been able to kill this immortal powerhouse with the ancient Pangu stone alone. But at the same time, after this incident, Ling Xiao had finally witnessed a corner of the immortal dimension and understood how vast this world was. The immortals were no longer a monolithic entity. If he wanted to rise again, he would have to borrow the strength of all races. Perhaps there were many immortals like Yi Luoyun who were unwilling to accept his fate. The road to heaven had only just begun. Chapter 587. On the peak of the ancient mountain, Ling Xiao stood with his hands behind his back. His white robe shone with starlight, giving him a sense of transcendence. From Yi Luoyun's words, Ling Xiao could tell that the Xingzhou continent was indeed a cage. The Foliaceae of the Azure world were the ancient clans that guarded the cage. Since the eastern and western borders had the demon bone seal, The remaining northern and southern borders must also have their own destinies. But, thinking of the white-haired woman in the sky demon's mind, Ling Xiao felt an extremely complicated feeling in his heart. This feeling did not originate from his heart. It was more like the obsession of the sky demon's mind. Next, it's time to destroy the Cold Moon's celestial palace. I wonder how many empires are left in the western border. In the end, Ling Xiao did not think too much. He put away the immortal cauldron in the ruins of the ancient palace and walked down the mountain. But before he landed, he saw Han Qingqiu kneeling on the ground at the foot of the mountain with tears in her eyes. In front of her, there was a deep pit and a pile of yellow soil. Young master, although you are ruthless, cruel, sinister and cunning, Qingqiu will always remember your kindness to me. Don't worry, although you are dead, I will work hard to fulfill your wish and destroy the holy church as soon as possible. With that, she took out a qiankuan bag from her bosom. It was the one that Ling Xiao had given her to store pills. She gently placed it in the pit. What the F***ck? Qingqiu, if I'm not mistaken, you made a cenotaph for me? Cough, cough. Ling Xiao shook his head with a smile and looked at the 9th-grade pill with clear eyes. Throughout the history of the Xingzhou continent, 8th-grade pills were the limit of the world. It was not that the alchemists were weak, but that the world was not strong enough to support the birth of a 9th-grade pill. Ling Xiao didn't know how Yi Luoyun had managed to refine this grade 9 pill. But, to refine a pill in 1,000 years, Ling Xiao felt a chill in his heart. The secret of becoming an immortal. With the divine energy contained within this grade 9 spiritual pill, he might really be able to break through the shackles of the heavens and earth if he ate it. Hearing the voice, Han Qingqiu's pretty face froze. But when she raised her head and saw the determined and handsome face, her beautiful eyes narrowed. Why, young master? At this moment, Han Qingqiu had never been this excited before. In an instant, tears welled up in her eyes. Just as Ling Xiao had said, although this spirit pill had taken the form of a human, its thoughts were actually extremely simple. Revenge. Since she was willing to give up her Tao and cultivate from the beginning for the sake of Cold Moon Palace Master, she was definitely a person who valued relationships and loyalty. I've already touched her, and I've also given her my concern. It's time for my stinky sister to learn how to cooperate. Why are you crying? Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled, a gentle smile on his face. Then, before he could even react, Han Qingqiu had already turned into an afterimage and rushed into his embrace. Young master, I thought I would never see you again. I thought you had exploded along with the mountain. Isn't everything fine now? Ling Xiao gently patted Han Qingqiu's shoulder. His eyes seemed to be muttering to himself. After the initial excitement, Han Qingqiu quickly calmed down. In fact, she looked at Ling Xiao with a trace of indescribable hesitation in her eyes. Why, young master, did you see that ancient expert? Since Ling Xiao had come out alive and the mountain's formation had been completely destroyed, it was likely that that ancient expert had died. This also meant that perhaps young master already knew of her identity. Would he blame me? Or eat me? Amen. Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. The smile on his face grew wider. How could he not guess why Han Qingqiu was so nervous? However, with his current strength, even if he ate this grade 9 spiritual pill, he might not be able to break through to the first level of the God Emperor realm. Wouldn't that be a waste of the Xingzhou's only grade 9 spiritual pill? Young master obtained that demonic item? That's right. Then did she say anything else? She also told me that the secret to becoming an immortal is right beside me. Qingqiu, you've been hiding it from me. Ling Zhao's eyes suddenly flashed with a trace of evil. Before Han Qingqiu could react, demonic light flashed around his body. It turned into a chain and wrapped around the girl's body. Young master! Han Qingqiu's eyes narrowed. Her face revealed a trace of despair. As expected, in this world people were greedy. No one could resist the secret to becoming an immortal. Oh well. As long as young master eats me and avenges me, I will die without regrets. Looking at the handsome face that was gradually approaching her, Han Qingqiu's eyes calmed down. However, just as she closed her eyes and was about to accept her fate, she felt a pair of warm lips on hers. Then, the young man's hearty laughter suddenly rang in her ears. You even hid it from me. How should I punish you? My little spiritual pill? Boom! The sudden gentleness completely shattered Han Qingqiu's defenses. She opened her eyes and looked at the young man's bright smile. Her beautiful eyes gradually widened until tears rolled down her cheek. Beat. The destined girl's mind has been shattered. She has submitted to the villain. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 1,000 luck points and 10,000 villain points. Beep. The destined girl has submitted. Additional reward. Destiny casting value 2%. 1 chance to complete the Tao Law. 1 heaven trapping talisman, 8th grade. Hearing the notification from the system, Ling Zhao's lips curled into a playful smile. The reason why he didn't rush to take the 9th grade spiritual pill was not because he was merciful. This pill now had the same goal as him, which was to destroy the Saint sect. After all, she was the destined girl. With her by his side, there might be an unexpected surprise. After submitting, Ling Xiao would have an endless supply of destiny points. As long as his realm was high enough, Han Qingqiu could give herself to him at any time. Killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Why not? Tao Law of Holy Words complete. Among the Tao laws that Ling Xiao had mastered, only the Tao Law of Holy Words and the Tao Law of Saber had not been completed. Compared to the latter, Ling Xiao felt that the Tao Law of Holy Words seemed to be more useful. It wasn't that his words were perfect. His casual words would be believed by the world. But more or less, it had the intention of bewitching people. More importantly, this Tao Law contained a trace of the original concept. It was not an evil technique. It would not be noticed by others. As a result, I, Ling Xiao, am the light of righteousness. Who doesn't believe me? Master. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have hidden it from you. Without you, I can still reach the peak of the world. So, you don't have to worry. With me here, no one can hurt you. Ling Xiao reached out and hugged Han Qingqiu. This time, the girl took the initiative to stand on her tiptoes and kissed Ling Zhao's lip. The demonic aura around him dissipated. Han Qingqiu's beautiful face had an inexplicable look of anticipation. Boom! The originally cold and desolate mountain suddenly had the feeling of spring. The 2 figures intertwined together and kissed passionately. At this moment, Han Qingqiu's heart no longer had a trace of shyness and resentment. Even the hatred in her heart was gradually melted by the warmth in the youth's arms. Until the spiritual aura rippled in the sky, the 2 turned their heads and looked at the distant mountain. In the deepest part of the immortal world, the space began to collapse. The clear sky turned into an abyss. Obviously, after losing the seal of Yi Luo Yun's divine power, this world was on the verge of collapse. It's time to go out. Ling Xiao smiled gently. Han Qingqiu nodded and snuggled in the youth's arms, allowing him to carry her towards the entrance of the immortal world. Chapter 588. Cold Moon Celestial Mountain, the entrance of the immortal world. 3 months were almost up. However, at this moment, there was not the slightest bit of movement coming from the entrance. The Cold Moon Palace master frowned and stood in front of the spiritual spiral with her hands behind her back. There was a trace of worry in her eyes. Now that the situation in the western border had changed drastically, the primitive emperor had wiped out the remaining 6 dynasties in a short span of 3 months with the momentum of sweeping away thousands of troops. Only the Great Qin Empire relied on the city defense array in Jingyang City and the 2 peerless generals, Ning Tiance and Xiao Beifa, to defend the city and not be wiped out by the Yuan Emperor. At the same time, the news about the Yuan Emperor turning into an evil demon spread like wildfire. Some said that he could refine corpses into an army and control the souls of the dead. Some said that he was a strong cultivator of the dark underworld and his subordinates were all ghosts. There were even rumors that a fierce demon had appeared in the western border recently. It was good at demonic arts and could turn mountains into seas. It could swallow thousands of people in one bite. Regardless, rumors spread in the western border and everyone was in a state of panic. Cultivators and civilians rushed into the Cold Moon Celestial Mountain, hoping to be protected by the Celestial Palace. However, Ren Yuang found it unbelievable when she heard all kinds of rumors. Before the opening of the immortal world, she had received orders from the divine envoy to go to the great Yuan Empire and ask Yuan Gu to welcome him. Then, the divine envoy arrived and there must be some instructions. But why did the Yuan Emperor suddenly turn into an evil demon, using corpses as the Tao? No matter how she thought about it, it didn't seem like a righteous method. Could it be that the divine envoy? Suddenly, Ren Yuang felt a chill in her heart. It shouldn't be. All these years, the Saints sect had been looking for talented cultivators of the Tao Law, but only brought them to the central border sacred ground to cultivate. But now, the divine envoy had just gone to the great Yuan Empire and the emperor of this dynasty had turned into an evil demon? No one would believe you if you said that there was no connection between the two. But boom! Just as the Cold Moon Palace master was puzzled, she saw a terrifying wave of energy ripple at the entrance of the immortal world. Then, all the elders of the Cold Palace were stunned to see that in the fairy world, the spirit mountain collapsed, the ancient forest was broken, and even the sky was broken like ice crystals. Whoosh! Just as the spiritual spiral was about to collapse, a white-robed figure flashed out and appeared at the peak of the immortal mountain. At this time, Ling Zhao's face was also pale. In his arms, Han Qingqiu's face was lifeless, as if she had suffered a great blow. Young master? Qingqiu? Boom! The entire mountain trembled for a moment. Shortly after, the originally towering celestial gate collapsed on its own until it completely disappeared. What happened? To be honest, Ren Yuang felt somewhat uneasy at this moment. The Divine Master had arranged for her to stay here for the sake of obtaining the fortune to become an immortal in this place. But from the looks of it, the immortals seemed to have shattered? What the F***ck? Palace Master, gather all the elders and disciples. Cold Moon Celestial Palace is in great trouble. Ling Zhao's tone was gloomy, and his eyes were solemn. Ren Yuang only felt a cold air rising from the bottom of her feet, and in the blink of an eye, it had reached the top of her head. Given Ling Zhao's status, let alone the western border, even in the entire Xingzhou, he could be considered one of the best, because behind him stood an 8th-grade divine emperor divine envoy of the sacred sect. But now, he said, Cold Palace was in great trouble? Young master, what the hell happened? Ren Yuang swallowed hard. She felt that the sky of the western border was about to change. We have all been deceived. Palace Master, Yu Shao colluded with the true demon and entered the secret realm. She also has a strange token that can resist the seal of the immortals. Ling Xiao sighed softly. Taoist rhymes surged around him. Obviously, he was extremely angry. What he said now was half true and half false. It was impossible for Ren Yuang not to know that Yu Shao had entered the immortals. After all, there were many strong cultivators guarding the entrance of the immortals. Unless they were blind. Or even, according to Han Qingqiu, Ren Yuang had been looking for the Cold Moon ancient token. Therefore, she probably knew the use of the token. No one was a fool. How could they believe a lie without some truth? And then? Young master, tell me. But how could Yu Shao bring disaster to the Cold Moon Celestial Palace? Not to mention the divine envoy, even she was powerful enough to kill her. Now that the immortals' world was destroyed, Once the Divine Master blames her, she would not be able to escape punishment. Therefore, someone must take the blame for this disaster. I don't know what method she used to bring Xia Feng into the ruins. Xia Feng? This time, Ren Yueying was even more confused. She didn't even take Yu Xiao seriously, so what was a mere Xia Feng to her? Moreover, with young master's strength, killing Xia Feng should be easy, right? That's right. Palace Master, you should know that the great demon is sealed in the immortal's world, right? As soon as Ling Zhao's voice fell, Ren Yueying's face turned pale. Young master, you mean Xia Feng is the reincarnation of the great demon. Yu Xiao colluded with the great demon. The two of them entered the ruins and released the great demon. Xia Feng's strength has also awakened. Ling Xiao was disappointed and frustrated. He gritted his teeth. If I knew this would happen, I would not have left this scourge alive. This, Ren Yueying was stunned and did not speak for a long time. At this time, she did not dwell on how the great demon, Xia Feng, Yu Xiao, and the others escaped from the immortal's world. After all, the ancient great demon's methods were not something she could understand. Moreover, when Xia Feng appeared on the peak of the Cold Moon Mountain, didn't he rely on the great demon's spatial teleportation technique? She just did not expect that things would fall into such a situation. Now that the great demon broke free from the seal, the first one he would take revenge on would be the Cold Moon Immortal Palace that suppressed him. No wonder young master said that the Immortal Palace would be in trouble. F***ck. Young master, why are you still hesitating? Hurry up and summon the divine envoy to protect the Immortal Palace together. However, Palace Master need not worry. That great demon is alone and without help. I have already sent a message to the divine envoy. He should be here soon. Ling Xiao smiled indifferently. Ren Yueying had just heaved a sigh of relief when her eyes suddenly narrowed. Alone and without help? It was widely rumored that the primitive emperor was an evil demon and that he had contact with the divine envoy. Suddenly, Ren Yueying had a bold guess in her heart. Could it be that the divine envoy had already joined hands with the evil demon? Otherwise, why didn't the divine envoy ask about the primitive emperor's strange method of turning corpses into generals? It couldn't be, right? The divine envoy of the sacred sect was only below one person and above millions. In the Shengzhou continent, the divine envoy was the embodiment of God's will. How could he collude with the great demon and slaughter living beings? Once this matter was known by the Divine Master, it would be difficult for His Excellency to die. No. There was another possibility. When the Divine Envoy went to the Yuan dynasty, he had already been killed by the evil demon? Ren Yueying's eyes narrowed and her body could not help but tremble. It seemed that, after the Immortal's world opened, His Excellency had completely disappeared? Young Master, you sent a message to His Excellency. Did His Excellency reply? Ren Yueying's eyes were filled with expectation, but Ling Zhao's expression gradually froze. His Excellency has not replied yet. Palace Master, did something happen in the western border? Chapter 589. Gulp. The entire Cold Moon Celestial Mountain suddenly fell into a dead silence. Especially Ren Yueying, whose eyes were filled with intense fear. No way. The Divine Envoy was an 8th-grade God Emperor. Even in the entire Shengzhou, only those old monsters who had lived for more than 1,000 years had the ability to kill him, let alone the Shijiang. Monsters? Impossible. Monsters had always been at odds with humans, but now that the Divine Master's cultivation was supreme, as long as the monsters had a brain, they would not dare to attack the Divine Envoy. But other than the monsters, who else could kill an 8th-grade Divine Emperor silently? Sea Tribe. Looking at Ren Yueying, who stood rooted to the ground, a sinister look flashed across Ling Zhao's eyes. From the moment Folded Shadow went to Diyuan, he had already thought of a countermeasure to deal with Cold Moon Celestial Palace and the divine envoy. Soon, he would set off for the southern border, where a divine envoy of the saint was guarding. Ling Xiao deduced that the remaining 6 demons should be hiding in the southern border from the knife demon's memory. But it would take time to find them. In that case, why not give the divine envoy some fun first? The Sea tribe had many experts, and even the saint was wary of them. Moreover, this tribe lived in the endless deep sea all year round and had never liked humans. In addition, the saint was unable to control the complicated terrain of the deep sea even if they wanted to. This was the reason why the southern border was relatively free. Barbarians, foreign tribes, demonic cultivators, and evil spirits all liked to live in seclusion in the southern border to escape the punishment of the saint. Folded Shadow did not appear as the divine envoy in the past few months because he had gone to the southern border. After all, although the great demon was good at transformation, he had to have a model. With her strength, wasn't it easy for her to disguise as an expert of the Sea tribe? That was the reason why the fierce demon suddenly appeared in the western border. The plot was roughly like this. The primitive emperor hid his demonic body and was discovered by the divine envoy who went to Diyuan. The leader of the 8 emperors joined forces with the Sea tribe and the true demon to kill the primitive emperor, and then slaughtered the western border in an attempt to overthrow the saint. Everything was flawless. The layout had to be prepared from several chapters ago. Otherwise, it would appear to be sloppy and forced. Ling Xiao may be a chess piece in the eyes of some supreme expert, but who said that chess pieces could not be arranged? One day, when all the chess pieces were placed, it would be the time when the demonic sun would change the sky and the universe would be reversed. You call this cowardice? Yi Luoyun alone had been planning for 900 years. In this world, the truly terrifying ones were never the monstrous geniuses with the heavenly mandate realm, but those who had lived for countless years. Not only in terms of strength, but also in terms of intelligence, they could be said to be close to demons. Palace Lord, what's wrong? Ling Zhao's brows furrowed slightly, and there was also a trace of panic on his face. Young master, ever since you entered the Cold Moon immortal world for 3 months, Milord has never appeared, nor has he sent any messages to me. Furthermore, the Cold Moon Palace master wanted to say something but hesitated. Although her guess was somewhat crazy, these days, Yu Xiao had joined forces with the demon and entered the immortals to save the great demon. What crazy things couldn't happen? In fact, ever since the day Lord Divine Envoy went to the Great Yuan Empire, there has been no news of him. What? Palace Lord, you mean? Ling Xiao sneered in his heart, but the panic on his face was just right. But in the next moment, he shook his head slightly. Impossible. Milord is an 8th grade great emperor. Who in the entire western border could kill him silently? Milord must have been delayed by something important. Acting, I, Ling Xiao, am not targeting anyone. Everyone in the Xingzhou is trash. Young master, there are rumors in the western border recently that the primitive emperor used corpses as soldiers and destroyed the 6 great empires. Moreover, it is said that a fierce demon appeared in the western border and turned the mountains into seas. I guess, perhaps, the primitive emperor was originally an evil demon and joined forces with the sea race to kill Milord. Ren Yueying sighed softly, and there was despair on her face. If Yu Xiao and Xiafeng really did release the great demon from the immortals, Frigid Moon's celestial palace would be doomed. From the beginning, Ren Yueying knew that although Yu Xiao seemed to have no desires, she had been brooding about the death of the previous palace lord of the Cold Moon Immortal Palace. Originally, Ren Yueying wanted to wait for Yu Xiao to bring out the opportunity to become an immortal from the immortals. Who knew her goal was the great demon from the immortals? Damn! Wasn't this the same as shooting himself in the foot? What? The primitive emperor is an evil demon? And how could the sea race have such guts? Ling Zhao's face turned pale, and his eyes were filled with horror. Seeing the despair on his face, Ren Yuang's heart trembled, and she asked tentatively, "Young master, the only thing we can do now is to stay away from the limelight for now, and then report to the immortal master and wait for his decision." "No. Before the matter is clear, if we abandon the Cold Moon Immortal Palace and the people of the western border and run away, we will be ridiculed by the righteous faction," Ling Xiao said sternly, and there seemed to be immortal qi circulating around him. Hearing this, the elders of the Cold Moon Immortal Palace felt a sense of awe. "See, this is our righteous faction's outstanding talent. Calm in the face of danger, with the people of the world as his wish, even in the face of such an evil demon, he still has perseverance. Lord Ling Xiao, you are righteous. You deserve to be erected, praised, and worshipped by the people of the world. What are you waiting for? Lick him. Young master, you don't know. If the sea race is really involved in this matter, I'm afraid even the immortal master will have a headache." Ren Yuang shook her head and smiled bitterly. Although there was respect for Ling Xiao in her eyes, there was a trace of helplessness. Now that the immortal master was dead, this immortal master was the will of the holy sect. If he did not leave, Ren Yuang would not dare to act rashly. But when she thought that even the immortal master was killed silently, she felt an inexplicable chill in her heart. "Oh? The sea race is so fierce?" Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. He had heard of this overlord of the southern border before. However, looking at Ren Yuang's concern, it seemed that he had underestimated the strength of the sea race. "It's more than fierce. The sea race is originally a branch of the demon race, but they live in the deep sea and live on the sea. They have never put the human race in their eyes. Moreover, according to what I know, the ancestors of the sea race appeared earlier than the demon race. Some of them have even more terrifying cultivation. Young master, there's no time to lose. Let's report to the immortal master first." Ren Yuang looked anxious. Obviously, she was extremely worried about the current situation. "But, how can I report to the immortal master? I'm not really a member of the holy sect. Palace master, after all, I'm a disciple that the immortal master recruited after coming to the western border. This matter should be handled by palace master." Ling Xiao nodded indifferently. His eyes were cold. Even if the experts of the sea race come, they will not be a match for the holy sect in the western border. "Palace master, quickly contact the holy sect and ask the immortal master to send experts to kill the demons." With the distance between the central border and the western border, even an immortal master would need time to come. And in 3 to 5 days, Ling Xiao would have a way to completely eliminate the Cold Moon Immortal Palace and the immortal master. At that time, all the blame would be pushed to the sea race and the primitive emperor. I, Ling Xiao, will guard the immortal palace, protect the common people, promote the will of the holy sect, and be respected by the world. Chapter 590. The Cold Moon Palace master looked like she was in a difficult position. In the end, she gritted her teeth and said, "I'll try." With her status, she did not have the qualifications to contact the Divine Master. Otherwise, she would be overstepping her authority. But now that the situation was critical, she could not care so much. "Palace Master, open the great array and let the people and cultivators of the western border in. Let's fight against the evil together. I'll go out and look for the divine envoy." Ling Xiao looked at Han Qingqiu with a serious expression. "Young master, you can't. Now that the western border is in chaos, It's fine. My cultivation is not high, so I shouldn't be targeted. Now that the situation is critical, I can't care so much." Ling Xiao shook his head. Although his figure was a little thin, in the eyes of the experts of the Cold Moon Palace, he had a different kind of strength. Sacrificing oneself for righteousness. This was an act of sacrificing oneself for righteousness. Inexplicably, the eyes of countless elders turned red, as if they were about to cry. At this time of crisis, they finally understood why this young man was accepted as a disciple by the divine envoy. Regardless of cultivation or talent, this young man's character was enough to change the world. "Young master, why don't I go with you?" An elder of the Cold Palace volunteered to protect Ling Xiao. "No need. The more people there are, the greater the risk of being exposed. I think even Yu Xiao and Xia Feng would not expect me to come out at this time." Ling Xiao's expression was resolute. He turned around and rushed down the mountain. The mountain wind gradually became cold, piercing the bone marrow. But looking at the young man walking on the mountain path, the hesitation in the hearts of the elders of the Cold Palace dissipated. Only in times of great calamity could one show the true colors of a genius. In this chaotic world, with a peerless genius like Lord Ling Xiao, what was there to be afraid of? "Lord Ling Xiao, we are willing to call you the #1 genius of the western border." No. It was a ray of light from the Xingzhou. This scene made everyone's blood boil. "Elders, now is the time of life and death for the Cold Moon Palace. Lord Ling Xiao has set an example for us. Next there will be a tough battle. As long as we can hold on until the Divine Master arrives, the evil demons will bow their heads." Ren Yuang took a deep breath and looked at the white figure that disappeared at the end of her line of sight. In the end, she did not dare to hesitate and walked towards the main hall at the top of the mountain. Xingzhou, Central Border. At the peak of the sacred sect, the saint of the sacred sect stood with his hands behind his back. His face was covered by the celestial clouds, and no one could see his face clearly. At this moment, her chest and hair were tied up, making her look like a teenager. Beside him, an old man with white hair and a beard frowned. "Holy Sun, the Cold Moon Palace Master has sent news that a demon has appeared in the western border and has joined forces with the sea race to kill the 4th divine envoy. First Elder, what do you think we should do?" The name of the holy child of the saint was Meng Yuan, a name personally bestowed by the Divine Master. However, no one in the saint knew about her background. At that moment, Meng Yuan's eyes were calm, and there was no sign of panic. It was as if the death of the divine envoys had nothing to do with her. Divine envoy Partridge's cultivation is already that of a rank 8 martial emperor. Logically, even if he were to be killed by someone, it would be impossible for him to remain silent. This matter is very strange. The old man shook his head, and the doubt on his face deepened. Just a few days ago, the Divine Master suddenly issued an order to the Holy Child of the Sacred Sect. The Holy Child would be in charge of the Sacred Sect, and he would be in charge of all matters. In his opinion, this should be the Divine Master's test for his personal disciple, or rather, a trial. After all, the Holy Child was extremely talented, and the Divine Master had personally appointed him as the next successor of the Sacred Sect. He entered the Sacred Sect at the age of 1 and was personally taught by the Divine Master. For 19 years, the Sacred Sect only knew that the Holy Child was extremely talented, but they had never seen his true appearance. Now, the Divine Master had retired, and the Holy Child had appeared. It was more like a transfer of power. "The 4th divine envoy is not dead." Meng Yuan's tone was calm as she looked into the distance. This was what made her feel the strangest. All the divine envoys and elders of the sacred sect had left a wisp of their soul consciousness in the divine token. If the 4th divine envoy had died, she would know. But now, Partridge's soul consciousness had disappeared without a trace. Therefore, Meng Yuan guessed that the 4th divine envoy was not dead, but just trapped somewhere. "Holy Child, you mean?" The old man's eyes narrowed slightly. There seemed to be Taoist rhymes circulating around him, and the entire world was inexplicably stirred. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and nodded slightly. "It seems that something has happened in the western border. Holy Child, please allow me to go to the western border to investigate the truth." "No need. The Great Elder still needs to stay at the Tao Comprehension Mountain. I will go to the cold moon's celestial palace personally. After saying that, Meng Yuan did not hesitate at all. She lifted her foot and headed down the mountain. Third elder, fourth elder, come with me. Yes. The old man was about to dissuade her when he saw a spiritual light flickering in the void. Two figures descended from the sky and followed closely behind Meng Yuan. These two elders were both 7th-grade divine emperors, and they were extremely powerful. With the two of them accompanying her, the holy child's life would not be in danger. At the foot of the cold moon's celestial mountain, Ling Xiao spread out his soul consciousness. After confirming that no one was following him, he headed toward the distant mountain. Master! The overlapping figure appeared from the void and bowed to Ling Xiao. You have done well. From Ren Yuang's words, Ling Xiao could easily guess that the ferocious demon that suddenly appeared must be the illusion of the overlapping figure. In this way, the demons and the sea race teamed up to kill the divine emissary. This was enough to make the holy sect suspicious for a long time. Of course, the sea race did not do such a thing. Even if they did, they would never admit it. This was the key to the success of Ling Zhao's plan. Master! These few days, the holy sect has been trying to contact the divine emissary through the divine order, but I have not responded. The overlapping figure stood up with a solemn expression. Originally, she did not know much about the holy sect. However, the longer she stayed in the western border, the more she understood how terrifying this force was. Not to mention the 4 great divine emissaries and the 7 great elders, just the divine master alone was an invincible existence in the lower realm. Master's plan was very risky. It's okay. The Hanyu Palace Master has already sent a message to the Saint Cult, and presumably, the experts of the Saint Cult will arrive soon. What we need to do is to set up a cloud of suspicion. At that time, we only need to place the divine order in the hands of the primitive emperor, and those people of the Saint Cult will come up with the most reasonable explanation. Ling Zhao's lips curled into a gentle smile. The premise of driving the wolves to devour the tiger was that there must be enough wolves. Only then could they devour the tiger. The Cold Moon Immortal Palace had a deep foundation. With Ling Zhao's strength, although it was not impossible to destroy the Cold Moon Immortal Palace, he would definitely suffer heavy losses. Now, Partridge Gully was sure that Ren Yuang had joined the Sky Demon. What he needed to do was to ask the divine emissary to lead the real demons to destroy the Cold Moon Immortal Palace. When the experts of the Holy Sect arrived and saw the Cold Moon Immortal Mountain occupied by the primitive emperor as well as him, who was leading the Great Qin's generals to kill the demon, do you think they would be moved to tears? Ha! Of course, if the one who came was not the Divine Master or a 9th-grade God Emperor, it would be difficult for them to return from the western border. The Holy Sect had a deep foundation and many experts. Ling Xiao was naturally happy to kill one more. As for the reason for all these disputes, the opportunity to become an immortal was the best explanation. Every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. Who in the Xingzhou would not be tempted by the temptation of becoming an immortal? Chapter 591. Great Qin, Imperial City. Qin Wushuang stood on top of the city wall dressed in a bright red imperial robe. Next to him, Xiao Beifa, Ning Tiance and the others stood with their hands behind their back. All of them carried a solemn expression. Beneath the city wall, waves of soldiers wearing different types of armor were lowering their heads and slowly walking towards the upright Sun City step by step. Currently, there was not a single trace of life from their bodies. Most of them had broken limbs. Those pairs of flickering scarlet eyes connected together and made people feel a chill from the bottom of their heart. Further away, millions of corpse soldiers occupied the end of one's sight. Endless and majestic, they advanced wave after wave. Imperial Emperor, I am afraid this city protection formation will not last much longer. Why don't you open the formation and let me out? Xiao Beifa's eyes were ruthless and there seemed to be battle intent circulating around his body. No. Ning Tiance shook his head. Although he revealed a bitter expression, the light in his eyes was extremely determined. Little brother Xiao sent a message to defend the upright Sun City to the death. General Xiao, please don't be impulsive. But once these demons break through the formation, I am afraid the entire upright Sun City will be plunged into misery and suffering. Xiao Beifa gritted his teeth fiercely. After being in the army for dozens of years, it was his first time seeing such evil things. They did not fear death, or in other words, they were already dead. Surrounded by ghostly qi, they killed with their instincts. Now, Xiao Beifa could recognize that these corpse soldiers before the upright Sun City came from different dynasties. This point could be seen from the armor on their bodies. Clearly, these should be the soldiers killed by the primitive emperor when he conquered the 6 dynasties. But how exactly did they end up in such a state? Stop arguing, let's wait. Qin Wushuang frowned lightly and his eyes were filled with coldness. Perhaps others did not know, but she knew the origin of these corpse soldiers. Initially, when she had just ascended the throne, she led the army to fight against the enemy. She had used this ghostly technique to slaughter nearly 1 million soldiers from the 4 dynasties. Only at that time, Qin Wupa had said that this technique must not be known by others. Or else there would be a disaster. This was the origin of the name Unparalleled Demon Emperor. In that battle, Qin Wushuang returned alone. 200,000 soldiers of the Qin and 800,000 soldiers of the enemy had all died on the battlefield. No wonder Ling Xiao had sent a message saying that there would be changes in the western border. The primitive emperor was Qin Wupa's backer. From the looks of it, that was indeed the case. Boom! Just as Qin Wushuang had finished speaking, suddenly, a surge of terrifying presence shot to the sky from the end of the corpse soldiers. After that, everyone was dumbstruck when they saw a middle-aged man in a golden robe with a ghastly pale countenance standing in midair. Boundless ghost qi coiled around his body, causing him to seem like a devil that had descended into the world, and he was ghastly and evil. The space in the surrounding 50 kilometers had formed a region of its own. There seemed to be layer upon layer of ghostly figures within it, and the howls of demons and devils caused the clear sky and bright sun to be slightly chilly for no reason. It's the primitive emperor. The eyes of Qin Wushuang and the others congealed slightly as a trace of astonishment appeared on their faces. Although the crowd wasn't familiar with the primitive emperor, but as the emperor of the first dynasty in the western border, his image had long been deeply ingrained in the hearts of the people. Dignified and upright, he had the potential to be an ancient emperor. But now, as they looked at the middle-aged man with a gloomy expression and a ghastly pale complexion, a wisp of shock appeared in everyone's eyes. 7th stage God Emperor, however, what was even more shocking was that Emperor Deyuan's cultivation had broken through to level 7 realm at this time. For your information, in the entire western border, the 7th stage was already the peak. Before this, only Cold Moon Palace's director Yueying had reached this level. Therefore, the Cold Moon Celestial Palace was independent of the 8 dynasties and possessed the immortal world. It seems that the primitive emperor is planning to fight to the death with the great Qin. Ning Tiance sighed lightly as ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. Then, he turned to look at Xiao Beifa, and a trace of a smile suddenly appeared on his face. I've heard that General Zhao's combat power is unparalleled and extraordinary. Why don't you join forces with me today and fight against this devil? Yes, Battle God Ning. Xiao Beifa nodded indifferently as blood surged around his body and dyed the heaven and earth in the same color. Apparently, he was ready to make a move. Ling Xiao, will this be an eternal farewell? Qin Wushuang raised his head and looked at the group of great primordial emperor standing in the distance. A wisp of confusion flashed across his pretty face. Calculating the time, the 3-month period was up, and the trip to the immortal world should be ending soon. However, facing a 7th stage divine emperor and a group of corpse soldiers and corpse generals who only knew how to kill, the great Qin had no chance of winning. Could it be that he really had to perform that ghost technique, giving him a taste of his own medicine? Now, the best way Qin Wushuang could think of to fight against the primitive emperor was to summon the souls of the dead here to fight against the million corpse soldiers. Then, Ning Tiance and Xiao Beifo would lead the great Qin soldiers to kill the primitive emperor. However, in this way, her ending would be no different from the devil. Forget it. Perhaps this is my fate. Qin Wushuang sighed inwardly, and a pair of ghostly blue evil lights suddenly lit up in his eyes. However, just as the ghost aura quietly dispersed outside her body, the primitive emperor in the mid-air suddenly turned his head to look in the direction of the distant sky. Then, before anyone could react, his figure had already disappeared above the void. The million corpse soldiers that originally surrounded the Zhengyang city also slowly turned around and walked towards the center of the western border. This, Ning Tiance and the others looked at each other, and only Qin Wushuang secretly heaved a sigh of relief. At the foot of the cold moon mountain, Ling Xiao stood before an ancient forest and looked at the immortal mountain shrouded in a formation in the distance. He had planted a soul seal in the primitive emperor's soul sea. Therefore, regardless of whether he broke through to the 7th or 8th stage, he was essentially a puppet, the kind that took the blame for death. Soon, a chilly wind whistled between heaven and earth, and the entire ancient forest seemed to have fallen into darkness in an instant. In the void, the primitive emperor's figure emerged, and his pale and thin face looked somewhat ghostly. "Greetings, master. Get up, do you know what to do?" Ling Zhao's expression was indifferent as he extended his hand and handed the divine token to Yuan Emperor. "Don't worry, master." The primitive emperor bowed and put away the divine badge, and the spiritual light around him suddenly flourished. Behind him, a group of great primordial divine emperors appeared one after another without any expression on their faces. Just in case, they were now completely controlled by the primitive emperor. Boom! Vast spiritual power surged to the sky, and above the ancient forest, calamity clouds gathered and thunder wandered. At this moment, Ling Xiao suddenly soared into the sky, and the spiritual light outside his body was resplendent. A black ancient pagoda was formed out of thin air, and suppressed the primitive emperor. Boom! Thousands of miles of forest turned into ashes in an instant. The earth crumbled and a deep ravine appeared. However, at this moment, in the ancient pagoda, a trace of contempt flashed across Feng Ling's little face. She waved her jade-like hand gently and removed the silver light that wrapped around the cauldron. "Humph, Ling Xiao, I have helped you again, don't forget what you promised me." Clang! The violent impact instantly smashed the cauldron to the ground. Among them, a trace of surprise flashed across Partridge Li's eyes. At this moment, he seemed to feel that the seal outside the cauldron was gradually dissipating. Chapter 592. Clang! Another wave of spiritual pressure rushed over, causing the cauldron to roll. Excitement flashed in Partridge Li's eyes. Could it be that Ling Xiao was fighting with someone? Yes, that must be it. Otherwise, why would the seal on the cauldron gradually disappear? He must be in big trouble. Clang! Clang! After several collisions, the seal on the cauldron was finally weakened to the extreme. Partridge Li gritted his teeth, and his soul shone brightly. He turned into a stream of light and rushed out of the crack. Boom! With the seal broken, Partridge Li's aura also weakened a little. However, the moment his figure appeared in the cauldron, his entire soul body began to tremble. An indescribably terrifying aura descended from the sky, as if it was going to kill him. Damn it! Can this pagoda suppress the soul? No wonder that bastard Ling Xiao trapped me here. Partridge Li wanted to cry but had no tears. He turned around and was about to return to the cauldron. Damn it! What can I do? I also want to escape, but with my current strength, I'm afraid I'll break the pagoda before it does. However, at this moment, Partridge clearly saw a corpse lying on the ground in the corner of the ancient pagoda. There was no sign of life around it. The fourth divine envoy hesitated for a moment, and then sent his soul into the young man's body. At the same time, the terrifying suppression disappeared without a trace. However, before Partridge left his heart for too long, his expression inexplicably froze. At this moment, he seemed to feel that this body contained a great amount of demonic intent. Damn it! He actually possessed a demonic body? In the ancient forest, Ling Zhao's lips curled into a smile. Long before the primitive emperor arrived, he had asked Feng Ling to cooperate with him by using a 7th-grade elixir as the price. Of course, a 7th-grade elixir was extremely painful for Ling Zhao. But compared to the foundation of the Cold Moon Immortal Palace, the elixir was worth it. After all, Partridge was the 4th divine envoy of the Holy Church, and his wisdom was far beyond that of ordinary people. If he wanted to invite him into the game, it would be impossible to do so without paying a price. In the end, Ling Zhao let out a furious roar. Divine radiance surged from his body, and the ancient glazed pagoda expanded to 100 feet in size, shrouding the primitive emperor and the others. In the space of the pagoda, Partridge Gully's eyes narrowed when he saw the sudden appearance of Yuan Emperor and the others. Especially at this time, the trace of evil fluctuation on the latter's body made the divine emissary feel cold both physically and mentally. Although he was in control of Xia Feng's body, his strength was greatly restricted. With the strength of this body, he could at most unleash 70 to 80% of his original body's strength. And these people in front of him were actually all the God Emperors? Suddenly, Partridge Gully's eyes narrowed as a trace of bitterness appeared in his heart. So fast? How did Ling Zhao detect the changes in the tower so quickly? Who are you? But, to Partridge Gully's surprise, the primitive emperor was not in a hurry to make a move. Instead, he was looking at him with a guarded expression. Humph, evil demon, you deserve to die. Partridge Gully snorted coldly as the golden radiance around his body gradually lit up. However, Ling Zhao had already placed a demonic seal in this body. Therefore, as the golden radiance spread, there was also a trace of black radiance faintly discernible. Demon! You're a demon! Damn it, attack! Kill this devil! The primitive emperor roared. Partridge Gully instinctively urged his spiritual energy and formed a divine seal in front of him. Wait a minute. What did he say? I'm a demon? He wants to kill a demon? Suddenly, Partridge Gully was somewhat confused. He originally thought that these people in front of him must be Ling Zhao's henchmen who entered the pagoda to kill him. But judging from the meaning of his words, it seemed that was not the case. You're not Ling Zhao's accomplices? Partridge Gully stretched out his hand and stopped the primitive emperor and the others who were about to attack. Ling Zhao's accomplices? I am the Yuan Emperor Yuan Gexing. That Ling Zhao true demon tricked me into planting a demonic seal, turning me into this inhuman and ghostly appearance. I came here to kill him. How could I be his accomplice? The primitive emperor roared, his eyes filled with killing intent. You also know that Ling Zhao is a demon? Hearing this, Partridge Gully's body trembled as if he had met a confidant. A heartfelt smile unconsciously appeared on his face. Finally, he met someone who knew the truth. In this way, even if his body was destroyed and his divine token was taken away, he would not be afraid of being misunderstood by the world. Of course I know. Not only do I know that Ling Zhao is a demon, but I also know that the Han Yu Palace Master is in cahoots with a demon and is plotting to become an immortal in the immortal world. The primitive emperor frowned slightly, looking somewhat puzzled. Who are you? Why are you suppressed here by Ling Zhao? I am the fourth divine envoy of the sacred sect, Partridge Gully. Ling Xiao? Suppress me? Humph, if not for sect master Taishuan's interference, how could a mere divine overlord be my opponent? Partridge Gully's face was filled with grief and indignation. He had already made up his mind. As long as he could get out of this predicament, he would immediately return to the central border and report this matter to the Divine Master. No matter what price he had to pay, he must kill Sect Master Taishian. Divine Overlord? The primitive emperor was stunned, and the coldness in his heart grew stronger. At this moment, his every word and action was controlled by the soul seal. But his consciousness was still intact, and he could still think. However, how old was Ling Xiao? How could he be a divine overlord expert? Moreover, what was even more frightening was that such a scheming demon who played the entire western border in the palm of his hand actually hid his cultivation? Damn! Suddenly, the primitive emperor seemed to have seen his end. Sob. I also want to struggle, but I really can't do it. At this moment, the primitive emperor finally understood the whole story. He was afraid that this divine messenger had been killed by Ling Xiao long ago. That was why the evil demon who came to Diyuan later used the divine order to impart evil skills to him and planted the soul seal. However, at this point, he had no other choice. Even if things were to happen again, he still wouldn't dare to have a trace of doubt towards the fake divine messenger who held the divine order. This was the power of the sacred sect to control the four borders. Especially for the human forces, the sacred sect was like the power of the heavens. Anyone who dared to have a trace of disobedience would only end up with their entire clan being slaughtered. So it's the divine messenger. Sir, you must uphold justice for the people of the western border. The primitive emperor suddenly knelt on the ground, and his eyes were red. The last trace of vigilance on Partridge Lee's face finally dissipated. With the strength of these people in front of him, although they might not be able to kill him, there was no need for them to be so humble. Moreover, this was the place where Ling Xiao suppressed his enemies. If he didn't fight with them today, Partridge Lee wouldn't have a chance to escape. Obviously, the primitive emperor and others were also pitiful people who were deceived by the true demon. Humph, as long as I can walk out of here, I will skin Ling Xiao alive and make him into a doll. Chapter 593. My lord, that Ling Xiao was injured by me just now. He won't be able to escape this calamity today. Primitive Emperor's eyes were gloomy as he looked at this space. According to my speculation, he most likely went to Cold Moon Immortal Palace to seek protection. Originally, Cold Moon Immortal Palace? Partridge Lee's eyes narrowed as he pondered for a moment. You mean, with my lord's strength, it shouldn't be a problem to deal with Ren Yueying, right? Primitive Emperor probed. Partridge Lee nodded lightly. If it was in the past, I could kill her with a wave of my hand. But now, I'm afraid it will take some effort. That's good. My lord only needs to kill Ren Yueying and leave the rest of the Cold Moon Immortal Palace elders to me. I don't believe that my lord and I can't kill these demons with our strength. Primitive Emperor shouted coldly as his Emperor aura suppressed the world, giving Partridge Lee some confidence. If he returned to the sacred sect now, he would inevitably be punished by the Divine Master. Not only did he let Yi Qinchan escape, but he also let the Sky Demon and Ren Yueying join forces to swallow the immortal ascension fortune in the immortal world. As long as he could kill the reincarnation of the Sky Demon, it would be a great merit. Presumably, even if the Divine Master blamed him, he wouldn't be too harsh on him. So, you have a way to leave this place? Partridge Lee's expression gradually calmed down as he looked at Primitive Emperor without much vigilance. It wasn't that his intelligence was lowered by Partridge Lee. It was just that, who could stand this trap after trap? Ling Zhao's injuries are rather severe. Right now, in the western frontier, Cold Moon Immortal Palace is the safest place for him. I chased him all the way to the foot of Mount Han. He only needs a little more time to enter the Immortal Mountain." Primitive Emperor's mouth curved into a sinister smile as his eyes were filled with killing intent. Now, Cold Moon Immortal Palace Master has joined forces with the Sky Demon to try and take the Immortal World's fortune. She didn't hesitate to activate the sect protecting array to prevent any unforeseen event. But I'm afraid she would never have imagined that Milord and I would be carried back to the mountain by Ling Xiao in a spirit treasure. As long as we use our strength to break it, this spirit treasure would break at any time. You mean you deliberately allowed Ling Xiao to absorb you into this treasure? Partridge Gully glanced at the Origin Emperor in surprise. He had never expected that the Deyuan Emperor Lord's hatred for evil would be so deep. He actually dared to take the risk and enter the Immortal Mountain in such a manner. Was he not afraid of being trapped by Ling Xiao in the treasure, never to see the light of day again? "Milord, you may not know this, but I, Princess Yuan Yao of the Yuan dynasty, is still in the Immortal World. If I can't enter the Cold Moon Celestial Palace, I'm afraid she will. So that's how it is." Partridge Gully's expression turned solemn, but his respect for the primitive emperor grew in his heart. This was the responsibility of a father. Even though he knew that the Immortal Palace was full of demons, he was still willing to take the risk to go up the mountain to slay the demons and save his daughter. "Don't worry, as long as I can walk out of this pagoda, this divine envoy will join forces with you to exterminate this evil spirit." "Thank you, Oracle." The primitive emperor took a deep breath and bowed deeply towards Partridge Gully. Behind him, the 4 great god emperors of Deyuan bowed as well. The entire Glaze ancient pagoda suddenly fell into silence. Partridge Gully lowered his head to look at his new body, frowning slightly as if he was in deep thought. In just a few months his life had gone through so many twists and turns. From the high and mighty divine envoy of the sacred sect to the Sky Demon's prisoner. But at the same time, apart from hatred towards Ling Xiao, there was also a faint trace of fear. Given the strength of the reincarnated Sky Demon and the trump cards in his hands, he had probably been hiding in the Xingzhou for quite some time. But even so, let alone the Divine Master, even the entire sacred sect did not notice any clues. That Milord had reported to the Divine Master that there was a very interesting young man in the eastern border named Ling Xiao. But it was only because of his extraordinary talent and arrogance. It was precisely because of this arrogance that everyone's thoughts were unknowingly numbed. After all, no one would have thought that a Sky Demon that was not tolerated by the world dared to be famous in the Xingzhou. Was this not courting death? Suddenly, Partridge Gully felt a chill in his heart. Given this young man's temperament, this trip would not be too smooth. Cold Moon Celestial Mountain, at the foot of the mountain. At this moment, the entire Celestial Mountain was enveloped by a large array. Vast spiritual power surged through heaven and earth, forming an array in midair. It was like a layer of golden clouds, intimidating all evil in the world. Divine light soared into the sky, and runes evolved into heaven and earth, embellishing the golden array, revealing its mysteries. This ancient array was left behind by Cold Moon's ancestor, Yi Luoyun, and given the latter's research on arrays, it would be difficult for Partridge Gully and the primitive emperor to break it. F***ck Rin Yuang had already sent a message to the sacred sect. If these 2 pieces of trash delayed for too long, wouldn't Ling Xiao's plan be ruined? Moreover, he was instinctively wary of Partridge Gully, an 8th-grade divine emperor and a divine envoy of the sacred sect, who knew if he had other means to contact the sacred sect. Only by trapping him in the tower, suppressing his divine soul, and letting the primitive emperor and others monitor him, would it be foolproof. I said, "Divine envoy, don't cry, I'll bring you out. I'll spit out blood and bring you out. I'll break this array and bring you out." Pfft! Ling Xiao spat out a mouthful of blood, then looked at his starry robe and frowned slightly. Whoosh! Then, with a thought, the first disciple of Cold Moon's celestial palace, Lu Yun, who was refining pills in the realm, appeared in front of him with a dazed expression and dark circles around his eyes. Plop! Greetings, Lord. Get up, I'll borrow some of your blood. Ling Xiao smiled faintly, but Lu Yun felt chills all over his body, and his head was lacking in oxygen. He almost fainted on the spot. Finally. This day has finally come. Since the first month, I haven't reached my alchemy target. For 3 months, my performance has been at the bottom of the entire elixir hall. Lord is finally going to kill me as a warning to others. However, this is Cold Moon Celestial Mountain. Lord, you're so considerate. Before you die, you let my soul return to my homeland. Alright, you can go back. Ling Xiao stabbed 2 fingers into Lu Yun's chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, with a wave of his hand, he sent the dazed first disciple of Cold Palace back. In the realm, Lu Yun lowered his head in a daze and looked at the wound on his chest. He didn't react for a long time. Then, Han Zhan snorted from afar. Hurry up and refine pills. Yes, yes. King of Medicine. Lu Yun looked up at the sky and knelt on the ground with a plop. Finally, tears fell from the corners of his eyes. What's wrong with bleeding a little? I eat so many spirit pills and immortal ingredients every day, so I'm full of vigor. Lord didn't kill me, but let me bleed a little. This is a spur to me. Thank you, Lord, for your kindness. From today onwards, Yun will definitely risk his life to refine pills and work hard to improve his performance. Look, there's a red-clothed figure over there. At the foot of the immortal mountain, several disciples guarding the mountain saw a youth slowly walking out of the ancient forest. Their eyes narrowed fiercely. F***CK. Why does this person look so familiar? Red-clothed figure? Hey, I'm Lord Ling Xiao. It's Lord Ling Xiao. What? Did Lord disguise himself? Quickly inform the palace lord that Lord Ling Xiao is back. Chapter 594. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At the peak of Cold Moon Mountain, the sound of wind breaking could be heard. Then, Ren Yuang and the other elders turned into rainbows and descended from the sky, standing in front of the mountain gate. However, when they saw the youth standing in front of the forest with a dispirited aura, the expressions on everyone's faces instantly turned sluggish. It's Lord Ling Xiao. Damn it! What are you all standing there for? Quick! Open the array and let the young master in. Quick! Ren Yuang shouted angrily. The spiritual light around her suddenly shot up into the sky and gathered in the ancient array above her head, turning into moonlight. In front of Ling Xiao, a crack appeared in the ancient array, and he immediately stepped into it. A strong smell of blood assaulted their senses. At this moment, everyone realized that the young master was not in disguise. His white clothes were dyed red by blood. Suddenly, the entire Cold Moon Celestial Mountain fell into a deathly silence. A wisp of heartfelt reverence arose in the hearts of everyone as they gazed at the young man in blood-red clothes, who had a pale complexion and firm eyes. Looking at the young master's appearance, he must have gone through a fierce battle. Fighting a bloody battle. This phrase was so noble and great. Some of the prides of the immortal palaces had tears in their eyes. Originally, in their hearts, Ling Xiao was an outstanding, righteous, and handsome immortal. Cold and arrogant, high up in the sky, overlooking the mortal world. But now, there seemed to be a trace of smoke and fire on his body. That was the protection of all living beings. Don't ask. Asking is the young master's righteousness. Young master, you are. Ren Yuang also had a trace of respect in her eyes. With Ling Xiao's strength, he could be said to be invincible among his peers. But he was only a 17-year-old young man. If he encountered a god king or a god emperor, he would definitely be defeated. But even so, he resolutely walked out of the ancient array and headed to the chaotic land to find the whereabouts of the divine envoys. Especially that day, the white-robed figure on the ancient mountain path left an indelible obsession in Ren Yueying's heart. Palace Lord, did the Holy Church send back any news? Ling Xiao shook his head and smiled, looking calm. Even though he was severely injured, it did not diminish his peerless demeanor. Young master's life may be full of twists and turns, but the word handsome will always be there. No. Ren Yueying shook her head sadly. In the end, she was going to bear everything. No. And Lord Ling Xiao? Young master, have you found any traces of milord? No, but Ling Xiao took a deep breath and his body staggered again. Beside him, a female genius immediately cried out in surprise and clustered around him, supporting his arm. Even if the smell of blood was unpleasant, it was still a great honor for them to be able to get closer to young master. I found Xia Feng and the others. What? Where is Xia Feng? Killing intent flashed in Ren Yueying's eyes. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that today's disaster was caused by Xia Feng. After all, according to Lord Ling Xiao, the origin of that demon was not simple. He had awakened his strength and released the great demon, causing her cold moon immortal palace to fall into such a predicament. If he didn't kill him, it would be hard to quell the fire in Ren Yueying's heart. He met up with the primitive emperor and I happened to meet him, Ling Xiao sighed, but he was pondering in his heart. Logically speaking, the saint's sect should not be so calm with the disappearance of the divine emissary. But the more it was so, the more Ling Xiao felt uneasy. Could it be because Partridge Li's divine soul was not destroyed, and the saint's sect noticed some clues? It seemed that he had to hurry up and urge the fourth divine emissary to die. What? Hearing this, the elders and disciples of the celestial palace were shocked again. No wonder young master would end up in such a miserable state. It turned out that he encountered Xia Feng and the primitive emperor. Young master, you are indeed the #1 genius of the western border. As a divine general, you escaped from the hands of a divine emperor. Who in the entire Xingzhou could achieve such a feat? So young master's whereabouts were discovered by the demon. Fortunately, young master could escape back to the celestial palace. Ren Yueying breathed a sigh of relief. No matter what, as long as young master was not dead, there was still hope for the cold moon's celestial palace. Unknowingly, Ling Xiao seemed to have become the spiritual belief of the cold palace. It was as if as long as he was there, everyone was filled with strength. No, I captured them as well. However, just as everyone was secretly lamenting in their hearts, Ling Xiao's next sentence instantly made the entire celestial mountain inexplicably feel a chill. What? What did young master say? Everyone looked at each other, as if they did not hear Ling Xiao's words clearly. Young master said, he captured them? Them? Young master, you mean? Ren Yueying opened her mouth wide, and there was a hint of shock between her eyebrows. I have a treasure that can imprison demons and have an extremely strong suppressive effect on them. So, I risked my life and captured all of them. Young master! Righteousness! Scream for me, shout for me, shake it up for me! Everyone's movements must be uniform. Originally, on this day, everyone in the cold palace was prepared to die in their hearts. After all, the primitive emperor was the emperor of the celestial palace, and now, he had joined forces with true demon Xia Feng and the experts of the Sea clan to slaughter the western border. Even with the strength of the 8th stage of the great emperor realm, the divine emissary's whereabouts were unknown, and he was most likely dead. What could they use to fight against the demons? However, never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that young Master Ling Xiao would be able to resolve this calamity so easily. Although young Master was seriously injured, he suppressed all the demons. What kind of great achievement was this? At this time, Many elders and disciples of the celestial palace had already regarded Ling Shao as an immortal god. If he was not an immortal god, how could he be so merciful and have such means? Young master, I desperately want to kneel down and kowtow to you. Young master, you mean you sealed Xia Feng, the primitive emperor, and the others? Ren Yuang swallowed hard, and her expression was already completely dull. Was it that simple? Why was she suddenly unable to accept it? I should not call him Xia Feng now. I heard that he was conspiring with the primitive emperor to impersonate the divine emissary, trying to deceive the entire western border and deceive the saint sect. Unfortunately, I saw through it. Ling Shao snorted coldly and gently waved his hand. A black ancient tower instantly appeared in the void. On it, the divine might was vast, and the spiritual ripples were fluctuating. There was actually a kind of power that could suppress heaven and earth. In the sky, a strange phenomenon began to appear. The sun and the moon sank, and the universe evolved into the ancient times. The decadent Tao sound was faintly discernible and melodious, and when it landed in people's ears, it was shocking. The origin of the Glaze ancient tower was originally mysterious, and it had long surpassed the settings of this world. Back then, the model of Yifan was also extremely powerful. Therefore, when this ancient tower appeared in the sky, the doubts in people's hearts instantly dissipated. A divine treasure! This was a treasure that transcended the heavens. No wonder young master could suppress the god emperor with this treasure. This was the so-called trump card that people often talked about, right? Good. The cold moon's celestial palace will celebrate for 7 days. Quickly, set up a banquet to welcome young master. Ren Yuang exclaimed in admiration repeatedly. However, right after she said those words, she saw that the mystical ancient pagoda suddenly began to shine with demonic light. What the F***CK? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.